The Sorcerer, The Path to Transcendence starting from Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301 Transaction. Morgans, long time no see. Kibison, a faint smile on his face, greeted Morgans first. Then, his gaze naturally shifted to Weiss, a flicker of curiosity and scrutiny in his eyes. He continued, "That big deal you're talking about is related to this alien gentleman, isn't it?" "Of course." Morgan smiled and nodded, then pointedly corrected, "You can call him Mr. Erwin, Mr. Erwin." Kibison cleverly changed his address, bowing slightly as a gesture of courtesy. "Here's what I need." Weiss didn't exchange pleasantries, simply handing the list to Kibison. He was always quick and decisive, not one to waste time on trivial matters. Kibison took the list, glanced at it casually, and his eyes lit up. He knew full well that this was definitely a big deal. Many of the items listed were strictly controlled contraband. The average person wouldn't even have the chance to touch them, let alone obtain them. But for Kibison, this wasn't an insurmountable problem. After all, he had been navigating the underworld for years, having bribed numerous world government officials through various means. Leveraging these connections, obtaining these contraband items was a piece of cake. For the right price, his bribed officials would do whatever it took to secure their services. Meanwhile, Tesoro possessed similar capabilities and possessed the means to acquire these contraband items. However, the underworld's business world was governed by unwritten rules and tacit understandings. He didn't want to compete with Kibison for business over this one deal, jeopardizing the harmonious relationship they had cultivated for so many years. After all, they all made their livings in the underworld, seeing each other every day. A quarrel over a small profit would be disastrous for the rest of their lives. Grand Tesoro was more than just a luxurious entertainment city, it was also a world-renowned exchange. With his immense power, Tesoro ensured that all parties involved in transactions here could conduct business with peace of mind, and no one dared to cause trouble. Whether it was a trade between pirates or even seemingly opposing parties like pirates and the Navy, once they arrived here, they could let down their guard and complete their transactions with confidence. Of course, as the owner of this place, Tesoro naturally would not trade at a loss. He took a commission from every transaction, which was a key part of his ability to maintain the prosperity of the city and accumulate his own wealth. "Getting these things is no problem at all," Kibison said, his eyes rolling, revealing the usual shrewdness and cunning of a businessman. Then he changed the subject. "But why should I trust Mr. Erwin to pay for the goods?" In his opinion, despite Weiss's display of strength, business was all about payment and delivery. Credit and payment ability were the key to a deal, and one could not simply trust someone based on force. Upon hearing this, Weiss offered no further explanation. He simply extended his index finger and gently tapped the armrest of the sofa. A dimensional rift appeared out of nowhere. Clatter, immediately, countless treasures, like a torrent of water, streamed out of the dimensional rift. The treasures shimmered brightly under the light, glittering gold coins, exquisite silverware, and precious jewelry inlaid with gemstones. For a moment, the entire room was bathed in the dazzling light. In a short moment, the treasures filled the floor like a tidal wave, leaving barely a sliver of space. This sudden sight stunned everyone in the room. They had never expected Weiss to produce such a large treasure so easily. "This is the deposit," Weiss said calmly, as if he were offering only a small fortune. "Ho ha ho ha!" Kibison was stunned at first, then burst into laughter, his face filled with surprise and excitement. "That's more than enough." He simply glanced at the treasures scattered across the floor, and drawing on his years of business experience, he quickly estimated their value to be tens of billions of berries. At his level, the amount of paper money was indeed less important. After all, too much paper money could lead to devaluation, while hard currency like gold was naturally better. He also wisely didn't ask how these gold and silver treasures were obtained. In this dark world of business, some things are better not to know too much. In fact, to Weiss, these gold and silver treasures were just a small part of his wealth. Keeping them would not be of much use to him at the moment, so he didn't feel any remorse about using them as a down payment for this big deal. Not just the items on the list, but all the most advanced instruments and materials, as well as food and weapons, the more the better, Weiss continued. His goal this time was not just to acquire the items on the list, He wanted to stockpile as many resources as possible for future needs. This, Kibison frowned slightly at Weiss's request, his face strained. Mobilizing so many things, he knew that gathering the vast quantities and types of resources Weiss requested would be no easy task. Even with his extensive connections and abundant resources in this dark world, he felt a bit overwhelmed. "Do you mind if I help?" At this moment, Tesoro, who had been standing by and observing silently, suddenly spoke up. Looking at the treasures scattered across the floor, he couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. He also understood that if this deal went through, the benefits would undoubtedly be substantial. Upon hearing Tesoro's words, Kibison breathed a sigh of relief and quickly said, "Of course, even I'd be struggling to mobilize so many resources." He knew this pie was far too big to handle alone, and Tesoro's willingness to help was a godsend. "Haha, it's a deal," Tesoro said with a smile. "I won't take a commission on this deal." He figured that even if he didn't take a commission, if he could establish a good relationship with Weiss through this partnership, he might be able to gain even more benefits from him in the future, which would be far more cost-effective than the current commission. "Then I wish us a happy cooperation." Weiss nodded slightly, a rare smile on his face. And so, after several people's discussions, a preliminary agreement on a major deal involving vast sums of money and numerous scarce resources was reached. Chapter 302 Promotion. 3 days flew by in a flash. Leveraging his extensive connections in the dark world and formidable resource mobilization skills, Gibson swiftly delivered all the advanced equipment Weiss needed. When the instruments were placed before Vegapunk, the genius scientist's face, once slightly worried, suddenly broke into a satisfied smile, and he nodded slightly. With these instruments, his many interrupted experiments could finally resume smoothly. Weiss had finally returned to Dressrosa. Upon entering the land, he witnessed a rather interesting scene. Black Dwarf and Luo Zhang were working together to pin down several pirates. The pirates were pinned down, their faces filled with embarrassment and resentment. "These are all after your bounty," Black Dwarf said in a muffled voice, his sturdy arm firmly clasping a pirate's shoulder, immobilizing him. "That's all. Actually, there were many more who coveted Weiss's 2 billion berry bounty. However, among the many who came to claim it, only these few were devil fruit users, which is why Law had deliberately spared their lives. Your strength is growing rapidly." Weiss looked at Law with a hint of approval. Since Law mastered Haki, his strength has truly improved. Even pirates with bounties exceeding 100 million berries wouldn't last more than a few rounds against him. Law's diligent training had clearly yielded significant results. There's been an increasing number of bounty hunters and pirates arriving lately, putting Cyrus and the others under considerable pressure, Law said, frowning gravely. He recounted the dire situation Dressrosa had been facing recently. The endless influx of bounty hunters and pirates, like sharks scenting blood, pounced on them in wave after wave. Although Cyrus and his soldiers fought with all their might, their strength was limited. Facing the overwhelming enemy, they gradually began to feel overwhelmed. "And there's news that the beast pirates have their sights on you." Law's expression grew increasingly serious, a hint of worry in his eyes. The beast's pirates were no mean creature, renowned across the sea for their immense strength and brutality. Wano's weapons and sea stone have always been sold through Doflamingo. Now, Law paused, then continued, "Cutting off someone's financial resources is like killing their parents, hindering their future. Now that Doflamingo has been dealt with by you, the trade channels that once flowed through him have also been severed. It's only natural that the beast's pirates would be enraged." Law understood the stakes. The beast's pirates would not easily let go of anyone who threatened their interests, and Weiss had undoubtedly become a thorn in their side. "It seems we need to strengthen these men." Weiss pondered this to himself. Cyrus arrived at the castle with his soldiers. This was Weiss's first time summoning them, and for these soldiers, it was undoubtedly a very important meeting. Each of them felt a pang of nervousness, as if a little rabbit was in their heart. Even Cyrus, a normally brave and fearless warrior, felt a little uneasy. Weiss sat quietly on the tall and magnificent throne, his gaze sharp as he silently observed the soldiers before him. Each of them bore scars, some still half-healed and faintly oozing with blood, clearly from previous battles with bounty hunters and pirates. These scars were like medals of their bravery, testament to the hardships they had endured. "You've done a good job," Weiss's voice echoed in the silent hall. Though his tone was calm, it carried an undeniable assurance. His words were undoubtedly a great encouragement to the exhausted soldiers, bringing a slight relief to their already tense moods. Weiss, his expression calm, took out a Philosopher's Stone. At that moment, magical circles, shimmering with a strange light, suddenly appeared on the ground beneath the soldier's feet. "What is this?" The soldiers' eyes widened, their faces filled with surprise and confusion. They had never seen such a strange sight before, and they felt a mixture of curiosity and a subtle sense of unease. "Hold still. Strengthen your bodies." Weiss's voice was steady and powerful, carrying an undeniable authority. He focused on manipulating the Philosopher's Stone in his hand, guiding the mysterious power through the magic circle and slowly infusing the soldiers' bodies. Under the red light, something miraculous happened. The soldiers' wounds, large and small, began to heal at a visible rate. Scars that had just been hideous and terrifying gradually faded away, as if they had never existed. Furthermore, some soldiers' long-standing injuries, the root causes of past injuries, began to heal under the light's illumination. Most astonishingly, even Cyrus's long-missing left leg, thanks to the Philosopher's Stone, slowly regenerated. The new leg seamlessly merged with his original body, as if it had never been lost. "This is nothing short of a miracle." One soldier clenched his fists in excitement, clearly feeling the earth-shattering transformation taking place within him. Previously limited by his physical limitations, he felt a surge of power, as if the shackles that had previously hindered his growth had suddenly been shattered, his strength increasing several-fold. The other soldiers were similarly impressed, each one felt a qualitative leap in their own strength during this miraculous strengthening process. Their once weakened bodies were revitalized, their eyes rekindled with fighting spirit, and they now possessed the strength to face any enemy. Luo, watching this scene from the side, couldn't help but show a hint of envy. He also longed for the opportunity to rapidly improve his strength. After all, on a sea rife with dangers and challenges, greater strength meant a greater chance of survival and a greater voice. However, Luo quickly adjusted his mindset. He knew he hadn't reached his limit yet and still had much room for improvement. He believed that through diligent, step-by-step practice, he would eventually reach a higher realm. There was no need to seek such premature methods of improvement now. Chapter 303 Big Mom Pirates Attack. Despite their significant increase in strength, the soldiers didn't slack off, instead devoting themselves even more diligently to their training. They knew the increasingly dire situation would lead to even more intense battles, so they needed to quickly adapt to their surge in strength to fully leverage their capabilities. They had initially considered the beast pirates an imaginary enemy, constantly preparing for any attack from that direction. However, to everyone's surprise, the arrival of the Big Mom pirates was truly unexpected. Dozens of pirate ships, flying Big Mom's iconic flag, appeared in the waters of Dressrosa like a dark cloud, obscuring the sky. This situation quickly caught the eye of Violet, who had been monitoring the situation at sea. Without delay, she sounded the alarm. "The Big Mom pirates are attacking." The siren's call, transmitted via Dend and Mushy, quickly spread throughout the city. While the residents were understandably a little panicked upon hearing this news, they had become accustomed to dealing with such incidents after the frequent pirate attacks. Everyone began evacuating to shelters in an orderly manner, the city maintaining a rare sense of order amidst the chaos. Law and Cyrus, upon hearing the alarm, rushed to the coast. Gazing upon the massive pirate fleet, they were momentarily bewildered, at a loss for what to do. "We can't let them land," Law said, frowning. He knew full well that no matter what the Big Mom pirates' motives were, if they were allowed ashore, given their usual pattern, they would surely plunder and burn the city, plundering and plundering the entire Dressrosa region. However, with their current strength, they had no effective means of stopping them. Even as the two worried, the pirate fleet continued to approach the shore, now less than 3 kilometers from the port. At this critical moment, Weiss flashed and appeared on the surface of the sea. He stood firmly on the surface, as if on solid ground, showing no sign of sinking. A layer of frost, centered around him, quickly spread outward, freezing the entire sea in the blink of an eye. Dozens of pirate ships were instantly trapped within the ice, unable to move, helplessly stranded. Charlotte Owen, Wano country's Minister of Baking and user of the heat fruit, scoffed upon witnessing this. "Watch me melt this little bit of ice." He prepared to activate his fruit power, hoping to melt the ice in one fell swoop, allowing the pirate ships to continue their journey. However, just as he was about to activate his power, Katakuri stopped him. "Since they've set up a stage, let's not spoil their fun," Katakuri said calmly. He jumped from the bow of the ship. Immediately, A dozen or so Big Mom Pirates officers followed him, jumping in one after another. They advanced towards Weiss. Soon, they had surrounded Weiss. Wes Erwin, Owen commanded. "Come with us. Mom wants to see you." In the eyes of the Big Mom Pirates, although Weiss's first bounty was a whopping 2 billion berries and he had defeated the Don Quixote family, he was still, after all, a newcomer, not yet truly taken seriously. Herr Weiss simply chuckled at Owen's words. Then, he extended his index finger and flicked it lightly. This seemingly casual gesture didn't elicit any particular reaction from Owen. However, Katakuri's expression suddenly darkened. Almost instinctively, he instantly blocked Owen's way. Channeling all his domineering aura into the trident in his hand, taking a defensive stance. Just then, a faint ding sound was heard. The once incredibly solid trident in Katakuri's hand was now covered in cracks. Like a kite with its string cut, Katakuri's body was blasted away by the overwhelming force. He traced a long arc through the air before slamming down hard on the pirate ship behind him. With a resounding boom, a massive hole was instantly ripped through the pirate ship's deck, sending wood chips and debris flying everywhere. Katakuri's momentum didn't stop there. He used the momentum to smash through several ships before finally coming to a stop. He lay in a heap of shattered planks and debris, looking quite distraught. Erwin watched from the side, sweat streaming uncontrollably down his face, beads of sweat dripping down his cheeks onto the ground. His throat moved up and down unconsciously as he swallowed, his eyes filled with fear and dread. He knew full well that if Katakuri hadn't blocked Weiss's attack at the crucial moment, he would have been dead on the spot, killed by Weiss. "Is your strength greater than Doflamingo's because you can see the future?" Weiss stood there calmly, showing no intention of continuing her attack. While Katakuri's ability to foresee the future had boosted his strength somewhat, making him a bit stronger than Doflamingo, in Weiss's eyes, it was still far from enough. The other members of the Big Mom Pirates watched as their proud brother, Katakuri, was easily sent flying by Weiss. Their rage flared, their eyes blazing with anger. Without a second thought, they charged at Weiss. Several pirates wielded gleaming swords, evidently masters of swordsmanship. Their footsteps were swift and agile, their swords dancing through the air in sharp, warring strokes as they stabbed at Weiss's vital points. Other pirates activated their fruit abilities. However, all these attacks proved ineffective against Weiss. Before they could even get close to Weiss, they were frozen in midair as if by an invisible wall, unable to move. Then, their vision went black as they plummeted to the surface of the ice. The pirates weren't dead, they were simply stunned by Weiss's stunning spell. These pirates, presented to him right now, were prime experimental material. He wasn't about to let such an opportunity slip by. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, Powerless. Seeing his brothers fall before him, one by one, defenseless, Owen's eyes instantly bloodshot, his heart filled with anger and resentment. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into the flesh of his palms, and cursed himself for being a coward. After a fierce internal struggle, he finally mustered the courage to attack Weiss, regardless of the consequences. Even though he knew he was no match for him, he couldn't just stand by and watch his brothers fall. However, just as he was about to move, a large hand suddenly grasped his shoulder. Before Owen could react, he was thrown back onto the ship by a powerful force. He tumbled several times in midair and landed hard on the deck, nearly knocking him unconscious. When he regained his balance and looked up, he saw Katakuri's tall, resolute figure. "Katakuri," Owen couldn't help but shout. As a fellow brother, he understood Katakuri's meaning. They had seriously underestimated Weiss's strength. In this situation, Katakuri clearly wanted to stay behind to cover their retreat and buy time for their evacuation. Erwin knew that with his current strength, staying would only be a hindrance. Not only would he be of no help, he might even hinder Katakuri. So, he gritted his teeth and, without hesitation, activated his power, rapidly melting the ice that trapped the pirate ship. Then, without looking back, he led the remaining pirate ships and swiftly departed the dangerous waters. Katakuri breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing Erwin and the others successfully evacuate. He slowly removed the scarf he had been wearing, revealing the sharp teeth and wide mouth beneath. His previously gentle expression suddenly became stern and serious. He focused his full attention on Weiss, his eyes fixed on her every move, not daring to slack off, like a cheetah facing a powerful enemy, ready to strike the most devastating blow at any moment. For a pirate, you're quite humane, Weiss observed Katakuri's actions, a faint smile on her face as she began to praise him. However, Katakuri didn't respond to Weiss's praise. In the future visions he foresaw through his observation haki, he had already seen what might happen to him, but that didn't mean he would give up his resistance. He took a deep breath, swung his hands sharply, and without hesitation, launched an all-out attack. Nine-headed Machi, Katakuri shouted, instantly creating 9 gigantic donuts in front of him. Immediately, from the donuts, 9 massive arms, reinforced with horn-shaped Machi, swiftly extended. Like 9 thick pythons, these arms struck Weiss from different directions. "That move of yours is a bit like Doflamingo's," Weiss said calmly, commenting on Katakuri's move with interest. He effortlessly dodged the attack from the 9 massive arms, his movements as light as a feather. Seeing his attack fail, Katakuri's eyes shifted slightly, and he immediately changed his tactics. His hands danced rapidly, shooting jelly beans at Weiss. The beans rained down like a dense, blanket shower, hoping to stall Weiss's movements and create a better opportunity for attack. However, to Weiss, all this was ultimately futile. Weiss reached out slowly and tore off a ball of Katakuri's rice cake. He held it to his nose and sniffed it gently, a look of curiosity on his face. He muttered to himself, "How interesting. My body really has turned into rice cake. Devil fruits are truly fascinating." He toyed with the rice cake and effortlessly countered Katakuri's attacks, as if Katakuri's full force attack were nothing more than child's play, posing no threat at all. "Momoku chance," Katakuri shouted again, and instantly, even more massive arms, reinforced by Momoku, emerged from the countless donuts. Like a surging tide, these arms, from all directions, swiftly and with overwhelming force, struck Weiss. The wind whipped up by the massive arms whistled, ripping the surrounding air apart, and the entire sea surface rippled with a powerful attack. However, despite the seemingly ferocious attack, the arm's fierce impact on Weiss failed to break even the seemingly invisible shield surrounding her. The shield, like an impenetrable fortress, protected Weiss securely within. No matter how fierce Katakuri's attacks, they could not inflict the slightest damage. Seeing this, Katakuri felt a deep sense of powerlessness. This feeling was so familiar, he had only ever felt this powerlessness when facing Big Mom's overwhelming strength. Facing Weiss now, he felt as if he were back to the insignificance and helplessness he felt when facing an absolutely powerful opponent. "You're distracted." Just as Katakuri was lost in this feeling of powerlessness, Weiss's faint voice suddenly came from behind him. Startled, Katakuri instinctively turned around and swung his elbow fiercely in the direction of the voice. To his surprise, the elbow missed, his arm skimming through the air without colliding with anything substantial. "Is my observation haki misperceiving?" Katakuri couldn't help but feel puzzled. His observation haki had always been incredibly accurate. With this powerful observation haki, he'd always been able to predict his opponent's moves in advance in previous battles, allowing him to respond appropriately. But now, a misperception had occurred, something he had never experienced before in his fighting career. "Observation haki isn't omnipotent," Weiss's voice echoed from behind him again, a hint of amusement in it, as if teasing Katakuri about his over-reliance on observation haki. This time, Katakuri didn't act rashly as before. He took a deep breath and quickly covered his entire body in armament haki. He concentrated intently on preparing for Weiss's attack, his eyes fixed on the surroundings, not daring to slack off for even a moment. Just as Katakuri was bracing himself, Weiss appeared before him with a swagger. "Even observation haki can be deceived," Weiss said with a smile, observing Katakuri's surprised expression. Indeed, in the world Katakuri perceived through his observation haki, Weiss should have been behind him, but in reality, she was right before his eyes. This stark contrast made Katakuri clearly realize that his strength was completely different from Weiss's. Facing such a powerful Weiss, his sense of powerlessness grew stronger. However, even so, he had no intention of giving up resistance, staring at Weiss intently, ready to face any attack that might come. Chapter 305, 10,000 Nations. "Don't be so nervous. It won't do anything anyway." Weiss's voice was flat, as if he were simply stating a simple fact. The moment he uttered the last word, Katakuri felt the world before him suddenly begin to spin uncontrollably. The intense dizziness, like a surging tide, instantly overwhelmed him, making his stomach churn and make him want to throw up bile. He squeezed his eyes tightly shut, trying to soothe the nauseating vertigo, but it was no use. The dizziness persisted, ravaging his senses like a shadow. Finally, Katakuri could no longer hold on and collapsed to the ground. He forced his eyes open, but his vision was blurry, only vaguely catching sight of Weiss's boots. Though his heart was filled with resentment, his body was completely out of control. I hope Mom can save my brothers. This was the last thought that flashed through Katakuri's mind before he lost consciousness. Then, unable to hold on any longer, he passed out. Seeing this, Weiss waved her hand expressionlessly, taking Katakuri and a dozen of his brothers into her own world. The Big Mom pirates. Weiss frowned slightly, a chill in her eyes. The others had already come to challenge him, and Weiss wasn't the type to silently endure a beating without fighting back. He always adhered to the principle of if someone offends me, I will offend them. With this thought, Weiss reached out and dialed the Den Mushi. Blue crack, the Den Mushi mimicked Morgan's. Take me somewhere, and I'll tell you some big news, Weiss said to Morgan's on the other end of the Den Mushi, his tone unwavering. A day later, Weiss looked down at the fairy tale-like country below, a flicker of curiosity and scrutiny in his eyes. He saw a staggered arrangement of uniquely shaped houses, all meticulously crafted from chocolate and pastries. The rich chocolate hue and the colorful dessert decorations made the houses seem like something straight out of a fairy tale, exuding a sweet atmosphere. Teams of patrolling candle soldiers marched in unison along the streets. This was Wonguo, home of the renowned Big Mom pirates. It felt like a secluded fairy tale world. Are you sure you're okay going it alone? Morgans asked with concern. After all, this was Wonguo, the home of the Big Mom pirates, a place teeming with experts and formidable forces. Weiss's single-handed entry seemed utterly treacherous. Don't worry, Weiss replied briefly, saying nothing more. Then, without hesitation, he leaped from 10,000 meters into the fairy tale-like yet treacherous Wonguo below. The moment he leaped, balls of blazing flames erupted beneath his feet. The flames began as mere wisps, but in the blink of an eye, they multiplied, spreading rapidly like a lit fuse. These flames merged and converged, soon coalescing into a colossal phoenix of immense size. The phoenix's wingspan reached a staggering 200 meters, ablaze with blazing flames, emanating an awe-inspiring aura. It soared to the heavens with a resounding cry before soaring swiftly toward Big Mom's position, the tallest building on Cake Island. Meanwhile, within Cake Island's castle, the atmosphere was oppressive and suffocating. Madhimalha Big Mom muttered incessantly as she sat on her enormous chair, drool uncontrollably dripping from her mouth, dripping onto the floor. The saliva was extremely corrosive, sizzling as it touched the floor, instantly carving vast holes. Katakuri was defeated. Big Mom's fierce gaze suddenly fell on Owen, her voice low and oppressive. Owen shuddered with fear, lowering his head, not daring to meet Big Mom's eyes. His body trembled like a sieve. Answer me, Big Mom roared when Owen didn't respond. She stretched out a large hand and grasped him tightly. Her expression became as ferocious as a demon, her eyes gleaming with rage. Why are you back, you loser? Big Mom cursed fiercely, unconsciously increasing the pressure in her grip. In the castle, whether it was Big Mom's children or Hazumi and his men, they trembled with fear, lowering their heads and keeping their mouths shut, not daring to utter a single word. They all knew Big Mom's temper well. Anyone who dared to cross her at this moment would face certain consequences. Wow, Owen, unable to bear Big Mom's grip, spat out a mouthful of blood. He pleaded with terror, mercy, mother, his voice, shrill and trembling with fear, echoed through the silent castle, adding to the tense and terrifying atmosphere. Waste, Big Mom roared, the sound reverberating like thunder through the castle, making everyone's ears ring. With a sudden swipe of her hand, she flung Owen to the ground like trash. With a resounding thud, a massive crater was shattered in the ground, sending rubble and dust flying everywhere. The immense force knocked Owen unconscious, his eyes rolling back. Had he not been of some use, Big Mom, with her fiery temper, would have killed him long ago, not let him live until now. Mom, Parasparrow, the eldest son, saw this and hurried forward, trying to soothe Big Mom. But just as he was about to speak, Big Mom's eyes suddenly flashed red, a sign that she had activated her observation haki, sensing something unusual. Before anyone could react, a high-pitched, resounding cry pierced the air, its deafening blast threatening to rupture eardrums. Then, a blazing wave of fire surged, instantly engulfing the castle in flames. The blaze spread with incredible speed, spreading in the blink of an eye, engulfing the entire castle in flames. The highest floors bore the brunt of the impact. The intense heat melted the building materials, like ice and snow melting under the blazing sun. A massive flaming bird's head poked through the hole in the melted upper floor, ablaze with golden flames, emitting a chilling heat. Boom! With a resounding roar, the golden flames exploded like fireworks, yet 1,000 times more dangerous. The scorching flames instantly engulfed the entire castle's highest levels. Wherever they passed, whether human bodies, special beings like Cosme, or even solid steel, the intense heat of the golden flames melted like fragile paper. Even the use of domineering aura to defend against the terrifying heat was powerless, and they could only watch helplessly as the flames devoured them. The entire castle was plunged into chaos and destruction. The cries of terror and the crackling of the flames intertwined, like a symphony of death. Chapter 306 End. Napoleon, Big Mom shouted furiously, and a strangely shaped hat, heeding the call, instantly flew to her hand. Yes, Mom, the hat replied. She reached inside and yanked a broadsword. The moment it was drawn, a sharp, cold light emanating from it. The spear of Elbaf. She gripped the sword tightly with both hands, raised it high, and swung it fiercely into the air. A massive wave of sword energy surged through the air like a surging tide, slicing through the very air with a humming sound. Not only was the sword energy incredibly powerful, it also whipped up golden flames, which soared into the air along with it, reaching hundreds of meters into the air, seemingly threatening to tear the very sky apart. Who is it? Who dares to attack me? Big Mom's rage was now at its peak. Her thick hair floated uncontrollably, as if every strand held an immense rage. The domineering aura emanating from her radiated like a flood, spreading recklessly in all directions. Wherever it touched, the air seemed to grow heavy. The weaker underlings, their legs weakening under the pressure of this domineering aura, collapsed to the ground. Nice to meet you, Weiss said, his figure appearing before Big Mom like a ghost, his tone tinged with calm. So tall, Weiss marveled inwardly, his 1.8-meter height resembling a tiny figurine next to Big Mom's nearly 9-meter mammoth frame. It's you, Big Mom said, her eyes blazing with fury as she recognized Weiss instantly. I'm here for revenge. You're so brave, every word seemed to come from between clenched teeth, tinged with murderous intent. I had intended to keep you, but now you've angered me. Big Mom spoke as she fiercely entwined her domineering aura around the Napoleon sword in her hand. The sword instantly glowed brightly, as if imbued with boundless power. Big Mom clearly intended to kill Weiss with a single blow, venting her deep hatred. With a fierce swing of the sword, a dazzling flash of light flashed. As if unable to withstand the immense force, the earth suddenly cracked, a deep fissure forming. The sturdy castle was split in two by the blade's flash, sending debris flying everywhere. The ground for hundreds of meters around seemed to be affected, collapsing and sending up a cloud of dust that obscured the sky. Those who hadn't reacted were instantly killed by the mere impact of the sword's sharp energy, their bodies collapsing like fragile pieces of paper. The buildings that had previously stood collapsed under the powerful impact, plunging the entire area into chaos and destruction. Yet, despite this seemingly devastating blow, Wes emerged unscathed. He simply commented nonchalantly, "Nice attack, arrogant brat." Seeing her attack had no effect on Wes, Big Mom flew into a rage. She swung her sword again, her eyes fixed on Wes, her fury threatening to consume him instantly. At that moment, a ball of flame with a funny face suddenly roared towards Wes from Big Mom's side. It was Prometheus. Its original orange-red color instantly transformed into a brilliant golden color, and its expression suddenly became ferocious, as if completely enraged. It quickly gathered its power, forming a massive pillar of fire, blazing with rage, and pierced Wes with such force that it threatened to incinerate him completely. But to everyone's astonishment, Wes easily blocked this terrifying attack with a single hand. Furthermore, Prometheus was horrified to discover that its own energy seemed to be continuously being absorbed by Wes, its own light gradually dimming. This had never happened before, and it stared at Wes with astonishment, its face filled with disbelief. While Prometheus's attack had no real effect, it did manage to hold Wes back for a moment. Well done, Big Mom saw this, and taking advantage of Wes's moment of restraint, she displayed incredible speed and agility belying her massive size. As if teleporting, she appeared behind Wes in an instant, wielding her Napoleon sword and slashing down at him with all her might. Big Mom was determined to strike, intent on cleaving Wes in two, the wind whistling as the sword swung through the air. Weiss was focused on testing the power of his domineering aura, so he didn't dodge Big Mom's fierce attack. He raised a magic shield, ready to take Big Mom's full force of rage and power. Seeing that Weiss didn't dodge or evade, and even raised a shield in an attempt to block her attack, Big Mom's anger intensified, and she increased her strength. Her arms, already as thick as tree trunks, suddenly expanded even more. Bang! There was a loud bang, a sound like thunder, making everyone's ears ring. Big Mom's Napoleon sword slashed fiercely on Weiss's magic shield, and the two collided head-on. In an instant, a powerful shockwave spread rapidly in all directions from the point of impact. The force of the shockwave was so immense that everyone around retreated in terror. No one dared approach, fearing they would be shattered by the force. Simultaneously, the entire island shook violently, as if struck by a massive impact. The tremor felt like a small earthquake, swaying the buildings on the island. Many already shaky structures collapsed into ruins. The sea surrounding Cake Island was not spared either, instantly surging with waves several meters high. The waves surged, one after another, crashing towards the shore with a roaring roar. However, to the astonishment of Big Mom and everyone around her, Weiss had successfully withstood her full-strength attack. And Weiss didn't seem to be struggling at all. He stood there calmly, as if he had just endured a minor blow. "Is that all you can do?" Weiss looked at Big Mom, his lips curling slightly, his tone tinged with a hint of teasing. Chapter 307 Battle. Ha ha ha! Big Mom was stunned at Weiss's words, then burst into laughter. Her massive frame trembled slightly with anger as she roared, "Little brat!" Then, her eyes glared, and she shouted to Zeus beside her, "Thunderbolt!" Zeus unleashed a horizontal column of purple lightning at Weiss. Like a giant, winding purple dragon, the lightning shot towards Weiss with a crackling sound, ionizing the air with a sizzling sound wherever it passed. Weiss teleported to avoid a deadly bolt. The purple lightning, moving so fast, had no time to change direction and rushed straight ahead. It pierced every building it encountered, piercing them like fragile tofu, and they collapsed with a bang. Undeterred, the lightning continued its advance, surging past Cake Island and roaring towards a nearby island. Boom! With a resounding boom, the lightning struck the island, creating a massive breach. Earth and rock flew, smoke and dust billowed as a portion of the island vanished in an instant, stirring up waves on the surrounding sea. The Soul Fruit truly equips Big Mom with a vast and diverse array of combat tactics. With a roar, Zeus, beside her, quickly lifted her massive form and launched her into the sky. In the blink of an eye, Big Mom was airborne, her hands tightly grasping the Napoleon sword, wielding it in the air. A barrage of slashes rained down from the sky, swiftly descending upon Weiss's position. The force of the blows was breathtaking, sending whistling winds roaring as if cleaving everything below in two. However, strangely, just as these slashes reached Weiss, they mysteriously vanished, as if they had never appeared. "What's going on?" Big Mom was startled. She immediately activated her observation haki, attempting to survey her surroundings, but found nothing. Just as she was wondering, the slash that had vanished suddenly reappeared behind her. This sudden change made Big Mom's eyes widen in confusion. She truly didn't understand what had happened, but she knew full well the power of her full-strength attack. Without time to dwell, she quickly gathered her armament haki at her back, preparing to take the blow from nowhere. With a resounding clang, flesh and the slash collided fiercely, the moment of collision producing dazzling sparks that shone brightly in the air. Big Mom's nickname, Iron Balloon, wasn't for nothing. Her defense was absurdly high. Even so, the immense force of her full-strength attack still caused her to fall from Zeus's body. Big Mom's massive body crashed to the ground like a meteorite, sending up a cloud of dust and creating a massive crater. Weiss immediately trapped Big Mom within a powerful barrier. Big Mom abruptly rose from the ground, swinging her fists and pounding the barrier. The barrier began to shake violently under the impact, but thankfully, it showed no signs of breaking. Then, under Weiss's control, the barrier slowly contracted, tightly trapping Big Mom within. "You're trying to capture me alive," Big Mom roared, her voice as resounding as thunder. "Who do you think I am?" Her roar was so loud it could have shattered an eardrum. Combined with her conqueror's haki and the power of the Soul Fruit, the powerful force spread like sound waves. The sound instantly echoed throughout Cake Island, even reaching several other smaller islands. Those whose spirits weren't strong enough, whose strength wasn't strong enough, were instantly knocked unconscious by the powerful sound waves, falling to the ground in disarray. Those who managed to remain conscious were all exceptionally strong. Who on earth is this? They've put Mother in such a difficult situation. The Big Mom pirates' faces were filled with horror. They had never seen anyone push Big Mom into such a predicament. What should we do? Everyone shouted in panic, the entire Big Mom pirates panicking, unsure of what to do. Calm down, Sparrow said, though he himself was unsure what to do. As the eldest son, he forced himself to stand up and try to comfort his panicked brothers and sisters. Mom is invincible. In the hearts of the Big Mom pirates, Big Mom's power and tyranny were deeply ingrained in every child, and they always believed that Big Mom was unbeatable. Even in this critical moment, they subconsciously maintained this faith, hoping that Big Mom would turn the tide of battle and once again demonstrate her invincibility. Yes, victory will definitely belong to Mom, echoed the other members, but their trembling voices and frightened eyes betrayed their deep-seated worry and anxiety. At that moment, Weiss flashed, instantly creating 3 clones. These clones swiftly scurried towards the 4 corners of the barrier, each occupying a corner in the blink of an eye. Then, 4 black chains emerged from each corner, like 4 black pythons, swiftly shooting towards Big Mom. The chains precisely locked onto Big Mom's limbs, binding her firmly in place. These were no ordinary chains, every inch was meticulously crafted from the soul. As the chains encircled Big Mom, the wailing cries of countless evil spirits suddenly filled her mind, attempting to break through her conscious defenses. Get out, Big Mom roared angrily, her roar exploding through the air like thunder, shaking everything around her. Her domineering aura surged forth, spreading a tangible sense of oppression all around. Even the soul-forged chains seemed to be affected by this powerful domineering aura. The souls contained within trembled, as if threatened to be dispelled at any moment by this aura. You're using your soul against me, little brat, Big Mom said, her mouth wide open, revealing a row of jagged teeth. You asked for this, she said viciously. Without hesitation, she activated the power of her soul fruit. Chapter 308 Ending. Under the miraculous and powerful power of the soul fruit, the 4 black chains that had originally bound Big Mom's limbs began to slowly twist. They intertwined and merged, soon becoming a single, fused chain. Then, this fused chain underwent a remarkable transformation, transforming into a gigantic, snake-like homie. Mom the serpent-like homie affectionately rubbed its massive head against Big Mom, purring softly as if coaxing her. What a good child, Jormungandr. Big Mom gazed at her newly created homie, her face filled with fondness, a hint of pride in her eyes. She gently stroked Jormungandr's body, as if caressing her most beloved child. Jormungandr seemed to understand its mission. Its massive mouth opened, and a stream of pungent venom shot towards the barrier that trapped Big Mom. The venom was highly corrosive. Upon contact with the barrier, it sizzled and quickly eroded a small hole. Enough, Big Mom saw this, a fierce glint in her eyes. She shouted, then launched a powerful punch. This punch, imbued with immense power, pierced the already eroded barrier. Bang! With a resounding roar, the barrier was instantly shattered by Big Mom's full-strength blow. Little brat. Die! Big Mom roared, carrying her in a Jormungandr blasting towards Weiss. The speed was so great, it whipped up a gust of wind, threatening to crush Weiss in an instant. However, at that moment, the Jormungandr suddenly let out a deep roar. Its massive body suddenly stopped, and then, a dazzling light began to blaze, growing brighter and brighter. Weiss knew that Big Mom was the user of the soul fruit, so how could she not hold back against her? He had anticipated Big Mom's desperate counterattack and had tampered with the chains beforehand. Boom! With a resounding, earth-shattering explosion, a massive mushroom cloud instantly rose. The explosion was so powerful that the entire Cake Island finally collapsed under the immense force, cracks forming, and the island shattered into pieces. As Cake Island fragmented, the sea surged in, pouring back like crazy. Many of the countless pirates who had been on the island were unable to escape and were instantly submerged. Sparrow, observing this, quickly unleashed his powers, creating several massive candy ships. The Charlotte family's siblings panicked and boarded these ships, their faces etched with fear and worry. Mom, someone whispered, their eyes filled with worry. Even Mom would be. Shut up, Sparrow quickly silenced a man. While he shared his concern for Big Mom's safety, calming everyone was more important at the moment. The waves pounded against the ship, rocking violently within. The moods of everyone on board, like the wobbling vessel beneath them, fluctuated. They waited anxiously, hoping that Big Mom would emerge unharmed from the center of the explosion. Ha ha ha! Big Mom gasped for air, the mere sound of her breathing whistling like a fierce wind. You actually managed to survive an explosion like that. Your body is quite remarkable. Big Mom stared at Weiss, eyes filled with disbelief and anger. She had never imagined that this seemingly insignificant kid could actually cause such a powerful explosion, leaving her both surprised and enraged. You bastard, Big Mom cursed through gritted teeth, her condition truly unbearable. The explosion and the subsequent turmoil had eroded her bloated body, leaving most of its fat drooping and sagging. She resembled an old, frail witch, her once majestic image a distant emperor long gone. Mom, let me take you away, Zeus said, his face filled with worry. Seeing her utterly destitute state, he desperately wanted to get her out of this dangerous place. Escape? I'm a emperor. Upon hearing this, Big Mom roared in anger, her hoarse voice dripping with resentment and pride. She had dominated this sea for decades, always forcing others to flee in disgrace. Never before had she been so humiliated. How could she bear to be forced to flee in such disgrace? However, circumstances proved more powerful than she was. Suddenly, several magic circles lit up around her, flickering in a flurry. Soon, they combined to form a single, massive circle. What kind of trick is this? Big Mom was startled. She felt her head ache, ready to explode. It was a pain she had never experienced before, like countless needles piercing her head. Then, something even more terrifying happened. As if pulled by a powerful, invisible force, the souls of Zeus, Napoleon, Prometheus, and the other homies were ripped from their original carriers. Instantly, Zeus transformed back into ordinary clouds, Napoleon into his ordinary hat, and Prometheus into ordinary flames. They lost their original homies' spirits and abilities, becoming lifeless. Weiss acted because he wanted to preserve Big Mom's body, thus launching this soul-targeting attack. However, he also knew that Big Mom's soul strength far exceeded that of an average person. After all, she was the user of the soul fruit, and her spiritual abilities were inherently formidable. However, the flaws of devil fruit users are all too obvious. For example, a simple pair of seastone handcuffs could restrain Big Mom's abilities, preventing her from using her fruit powers to resist. Finally, with Big Mom's eyes filled with resignation, Weiss finally extracted her soul piece by piece. Her once massive body, completely devoid of life after the extraction, became Weiss's research material. Big Mom's children watched helplessly as this unfolded, unable to believe their eyes. They stood transfixed, stunned. Mom, failed, someone muttered in a trembling voice, their eyes filled with fear and despair. Run, Sparrow was the first to react. He shouted, attempting to flee this horrific place with his siblings. However, it was too late. Weiss had already set their sights on them, and there was no way he would let them escape so easily. A few minutes later, Morgans flew down from the sky. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself and kept muttering, "This is really incredible news. The whole world is going to be shocked." His excited look showed that he had already seen the huge waves that this news would create in the whole world. Chapter 309 Becoming a Pirate. Earlier in the Grand Line, the Straw Hat Pirates had just suffered a devastating defeat. The memory of that scene still haunted them. Aokiji alone had easily laid waste to their entire crew. Had Aokiji not harbored any ill intentions at the time, they would have been captured and impelled to spend the rest of their lives in that dark and gloomy place. Yet, even after such a setback, the atmosphere on the Straw Hat Pirates ship remained remarkably cheerful. They continued their journey towards Water 7, seemingly unable to permanently dampen their optimism. 200 belly. Why don't you just go grab it? Nami, standing at the bow, barked at the newspaper gull. The gull was incredibly stubborn, refusing to hand over the newspaper without payment. It circled the bow, its small eyes fixed on Nami, as if waiting for her to pay. Oh my god, Nami muttered helplessly, but there was nothing she could do. Pirates who wanted to know what was happening recently on the seas had no choice but to rely on the world economic news. Especially for smaller pirate groups like the Straw Hat Pirates, who hadn't yet established their own intelligence network, they could only obtain information from the outside world by purchasing newspapers. Finally, after Nami reluctantly paid, the seagull handed her the newspaper. As soon as she took it, Nami noticed it was thicker than usual. Looks like something big is happening, Nami thought to herself, a look of curiosity and worry crossing her face. She quickly opened the paper and was immediately greeted by a striking headline, "The Emperor's Fall." Nami's pupils constricted, and she was startled. This is truly a major event. That day, Weiss's name spread throughout the seas. From the almighty five elders to the beggars on the streets, nearly everyone knew the astonishing news that Weiss had single-handedly defeated the Big Mom pirates. He not only captured Big Mom herself, but also the 4 Sweet Stars and all the other leaders of the Big Mom pirates. This feat was simply unbelievable. You're kidding. One man accomplished something the Navy couldn't, someone exclaimed in astonishment, their mouths gaping in disbelief. So, he's even more powerful than Whitebird, another echoed, their eyes filled with wonder. The strongest in the world, everyone chattered, the entire ocean seething with excitement over this news. On Onigashima Island in Wano country, Kato drank while listening to his men report the news. Upon hearing the news of Big Mom's defeat and capture, he couldn't help but burst into tears, whispering, "That old woman was killed." His expression was a mixture of surprise at Big Mom's defeat, yet something else seemed to be tinged with emotion. Quinn's hands were shaking as he held the newspaper. He knew Big Mom's terrifying power well. How could such an incredibly powerful being be defeated so easily? How could he not be shocked? The operation against Dressrosa can be suspended. Jin, observing Kato's reaction from the side, thought for a moment before suggesting it. "Whatever," Kato replied nonchalantly. He then abruptly stood up, instantly transforming into Blue Dragon. With a deafening roar, he crashed through the roof and soared into the air. He was filled with an inexplicable sense of unease. Big Mom's failure seemed to offer a glimpse into his own future, and he simply wanted to vent, to release all the pent-up emotions within. He circled in the sky, alternately roaring and frantically soaring, as if to unsettle the very heavens. The specific reactions of the Whitebird and Red Hair pirates to this shocking news will be left unsaid for now. Back at Marine headquarters, the top brass gathered again in response to Weiss's surprising move, and the atmosphere in the conference room was particularly solemn. "Where's Kalji?" Kizaru's usual languid expression now took on a serious tone. He frowned slightly and said, "He actually defeated that monster Big Mom. That alien is truly a monster among monsters." His words betrayed both awe and fear of Weiss's prowess. Sengoku clutched his forehead, a look of pain on his face. He sighed helplessly, "One Shichibuke, one Yonkoku. The balance of this world is about to be upset." The long-standing balance between the Navy, the Yonkoku, and the Shichibuke had always been a crucial factor in maintaining relative stability in the ocean. Now, with Weiss's appearance, that balance was about to be shattered. How could this not cause Sengoku great worry? Akanyu sat there, speechless, his face stern and serious, his mind brooding. "We've been searching for a new Shichibuke candidate, and we already have several candidates," Chief of Staff Churu said, carefully examining Weiss's photo, a thoughtful glint in her eyes. "As for the new 4 emperors, don't we have a ready-made candidate?" She casually offered her idea. "But he's not a pirate," Aokiji asked, puzzled. "Weiss wasn't a pirate, so how could this even work?" "Does it matter?" Churu tapped the table lightly, his tone undeniable. "As long as it maintains the balance of the sea, let Morgans promote it. Even if he's not a pirate, he's still a pirate." Churu believed that, for the sake of the greater good, giving Weiss a pirate identity wasn't a bad idea, as long as it could stabilize the precarious situation. "That's right," Sengoku slammed his hand on the table, as if he had made a firm decision. "It's settled." Then, he personally picked up the phone and dialed Morgan's number, demanding that Morgans cooperate unconditionally with the Navy and grant Weiss the status of a pirate. Morgans was also filled with frustration after receiving Sengoku's call, but he didn't dare disobey the Navy and the world government. Afterward, he could only explain to Weiss, "That's just how it is. This isn't just the Navy's decision, it's the world government's as well." "Whatever," Weiss said, seemingly unfazed by his forced pirate status. He always acted on his own terms, and this so-called status was nothing more than a title. Morgans breathed a sigh of relief at Weiss's reaction. Thus, through the manipulation of the Navy and the world government, a new 4 emperors was born, the outsider, Wes Erwin, with a bounty of 5 billion berries. Chapter 310, Sabaody Archipelago. A month or so passed quietly, and Weiss and Luo appeared in the Sabaody Archipelago. The Sabaody Archipelago boasts a unique landscape, most notably the Argiman mangroves. The roots of these mangroves secrete a special natural resin through respiration. Once exposed to air, this resin expands as if by magic, forming crystal-clear bubbles that float gracefully into the sky. These bubbles have unique habits. They are only suited to the specific climate of the Argiman mangroves. If the bubbles are outside the Sabaody archipelago's climate, the resin will explode, unable to fully exert its power. In this archipelago, bubble culture permeates every corner. The bubble cars crisscrossing the streets are so unique and adorable, they seem like something straight out of a fairy tale. And the towering bubble Ferris wheel, as it slowly rotates, offers passengers a thrilling ride while taking in the stunning views of the archipelago. Not to mention the houses built atop the bubbles, which resemble dreamlike castles suspended in midair, creating a dreamlike experience. This is also the essential route for pirates on their way to the New World. Countless pirates, filled with dreams and ambitions, stop here to coat their ships and prepare for their journey. Weiss had come here specifically for the Alchiman mangroves. The Sabaody archipelago is built entirely on Alchiman mangroves, and this unique plant seems to hold many mysteries, captivating Weiss. The main reason was that he'd been constantly conducting experiments lately, his mind constantly on edge, and he needed a break from the stress and a break. To avoid unnecessary trouble, both Weiss and Law wore masks. Just like that, they strolled leisurely through the Sabaody archipelago like two ordinary tourists. Even so close to the naval headquarters, countless pirates still unscrupulously coated their ships here before sailing unscrupulously to the New World. As to why the Navy allowed pirates to enter the New World through this area, the reasons were a matter of opinion, perhaps involving complex considerations and trade-offs. The Sabaody archipelago was clearly divided into zones, as indicated by the numbers on the trees. Zones 1 to 29, primarily housing human trafficking shops, human auctions, and lawless areas. Zones 30 to 39, primarily housing Soap Bubble Park. Zones 40 to 49, primarily housing tourist areas and souvenir shops. Zones 50 to 59, primarily housing shipyards and coating craftsmen. Zones 60 to 69, primarily housing naval bases and government offices. Zones 70 to 79, primarily housing inns. It can only be said that the world government is rotten to the core. They claim to have abolished slavery, but in reality, it's just a game of words. By simply giving their evil operation a seemingly respectable name, Human Employment Agency, they can brazenly continue their despicable human trafficking. It's truly despicable. Weiss and Law toured the Sabaody archipelago, sampling the local delicacies and experiencing the unique charm of the archipelago. Afterward, they visited the island's largest human trafficking shop. Even without flamingos backing, business was as brisk as ever, bustling with activity. However, beneath this bustle lay an endless darkness and evil. Weiss and Law leisurely found a seat and quietly waited for the auction to begin. "I didn't expect you'd be interested in this kind of thing," Law said, raising an eyebrow and looking at Weiss with a hint of confusion. "Just bored," Weiss replied indifferently, a hint of laziness in his eyes, as if he'd truly come here simply to kill time. After settling down, Law quietly began to observe his surroundings. He spotted quite a few prominent figures. Kings of several nations, either adorned with ornate attire or with haughty expressions, clearly accustomed to a superior air. Even in the front row sat 3 celestial dragons, their airs of superiority as if everyone else were mere ants. Of course, there were also pirates. Law's gaze swept through the crowd until he spotted this year's supernova, Eustocha Kid, whose bounty exceeded 300 million berries. Weiss's previous actions had had a profound impact on the pirate world, and as a result, Law's bounty had surpassed 400 million berries. Furthermore, after numerous battles with New World pirates, Law's strength had greatly increased. So, at this moment, he ignored Kid, simply glancing casually before looking away. Just as Law continued to observe his surroundings, a sudden, chaotic noise erupted, and the Straw Hat Pirates rushed in. Their vibrant and energetic presence stood out against a backdrop of this human trafficking parlor, shrouded in sin and darkness. Even Weiss, who had always seemed somewhat nonchalant, was instantly drawn to them. Weiss's lips curled up at the sight of the familiar figures. One piece was his lost youth. "Do you know them?" Law keenly noticed a difference in Weiss's expression, as if she held a special interest in the Straw Hats. "I've heard their story." Weiss's lips curled slightly. Law naturally assumed Weiss had read about the Straw Hat Pirates in the newspaper. After all, their previous rampage on Judicial Island had caused a stir across the ocean. It was the first time in 800 years that anyone had dared to make such a bold move against the world government's judicial island, and that incident had made the Straw Hat Pirates' name known to even more people. Law wasn't surprised that Weiss would be concerned. Events unfolded much as in the original story. The celestial dragon, Charles Saint, bought Kami and insulted her wantonly, even shooting Hatchie with a gun. This behavior completely enraged Luffy, and he ignored those around him and leaped directly from the audience onto the auction table. His rubber arms instantly extended, and he punched Charles Saint in the face. He sent the arrogant celestial dragon flying, sending him slamming against the wall and instantly passing out. This shocking move threw the entire auction venue into chaos. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311 First Encounter. A celestial dragon got beaten. Luffy's punch instantly silenced the once bustling auction scene, so quiet that even the sound of breathing could be heard. What's going on, Luffy? The person involved looked bewildered, scratching his head in confusion. I just punched him. Why is everyone so quiet? In Luffy's naive mind, the guy had bullied Kami, and he simply couldn't stand it and was just giving him a lesson, not realizing the seriousness of the matter. Asshole. That's a celestial dragon, someone nearby shouted in fear, their voices trembling with fear. You've got us in big trouble now. The Admiral is coming. The celestial dragons were godlike beings on this sea, high and mighty, acting with impunity, yet no one dared to mess with them. Most of the people at this auction were lawless individuals, already engaged in shady dealings. Now that a celestial dragon had been beaten, it was undoubtedly going to become a brutal battlefield. Once the Admiral arrived, it would surely be a bloodbath. At this thought, everyone panicked and fled, desperate to escape this troubled place as quickly as possible. St. Roswald, trembling with rage, shouted, "Take down these lunatics." However, his men were no match for the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy and his companions quickly dispatched the charging men, sending them reeling and tumbling to the ground in an instant, unable to fight back. Seeing this, Charlie Amaya, furious, drew her gun and pointed it at Kami in the fish tank, threateningly, "Are you here to save the stinking fish?" She was about to pull the trigger. At this critical moment, a powerful surge of domineering aura erupted from the background. Like a surging wave, it swept in all directions, knocking the weaker ones unconscious and sprawling to the ground. I didn't expect there would be a master at the auction. Law gripped his sword tightly, his expression solemn. Someone who could freely unleash Conqueror's haki wasn't easy to deal with. It looked like this auction was about to get even more complicated. Just as everyone was still stunned by this sudden display of haki, a silver-haired, slippered old man emerged, laughing heartily. I didn't expect to meet the legendary figure here. Someone instantly recognized him. It was none other than Rayleigh, the legendary pirate known as Pluto and former deputy to the Pirate King. Ha, I'm just a retired old man, Rayleigh said with a smile. His seemingly casual words betrayed a calmness born of experience. Rayleigh's gaze strayed towards Luffy, and when he saw Luffy's hat, his expression shifted slightly, as if a memory had occurred. Just as he was about to speak, his observation haki began to frantically warn him of a potential danger. At that moment, Weiss walked slowly and leisurely to the auction table. He surveyed the chaotic scene around him, then said calmly to Rayleigh, who was blocking the way, "Please make way." Rayleigh's eyes suddenly sharpened, and he stared at Weiss intently, his heart filled with wariness. Although he still didn't know Weiss's intentions, he couldn't afford to be careless in this situation. "Don't worry, I mean you no harm." Weiss, sensing Rayleigh's wariness, smiled slightly, then gently kicked and flipped Shialulia Palace over. He looked down and said, as if assessing a commodity, "Not bad, still alive, worth trading." "Who is this guy?" Everyone around stared at Weiss in confusion, wondering what this mysterious figure was up to. Weiss ignored their doubts and simply pointed at the three celestial dragons lying on the ground. "Take them, Luo," he said to Luo. Luo stood up at Weiss's words, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Although he wore a mask, his signature spotted hat and the unique weapon he wielded, the demon cry, were instantly recognizable, instantly recognizing him. "He's the Surgeon of Death," someone exclaimed in surprise. "Why is a four emperors cadre here?" This further perplexed everyone, puzzled by Law's presence in paradise. The moment Weiss gave Law his orders, the wisest of those who saw him presumed to understand Weiss's identity. After all, there was probably only one person in the sea who could so casually order Law. Damn it! Four emperors here? Are they declaring war on Marine headquarters? Someone cried out in fear, their voices filled with worry and panic. To them, the presence of the four emperors posed a significant risk and danger, especially in the Sybaote archipelago, so close to Marine headquarters. If the four emperors provoked trouble there, it would undoubtedly trigger a devastating war. We can't stay here anymore. Leave now, numerous people responded, eager to leave this troubled place and escape the potential fighting and conflict. Raleigh, a veteran and experienced warrior, quickly guessed Weiss's identity. He frowned slightly, wondering, why are we here? Looks like today's events aren't going to end so easily, but he maintained a nonchalant demeanor, muttering, I was just trying to earn some pocket money, but I didn't expect it to be so busy today. Upon hearing Weiss's command, Luo immediately piled up the three celestial dragons like building blocks and effortlessly hoisted them onto his shoulders. The sight was even more incredible to those watching. After all, the celestial dragons were considered godlike beings, yet they were being carried like cargo, a truly shocking sight. Weiss, realizing his identity had been exposed, simply removed his mask and revealed himself to the crowd. He knew his actions were deliberate. After all, he needed to get some information across. Weiss then swaggered out of the auction with Law. Before leaving, he paused to glance back at the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy, seeing Weiss's gaze, stared at him fearlessly. In his mind, he didn't care if the other party was a Yonko or not, as long as they bullied his friends, he wouldn't be afraid. But this glance frightened the timid trio of Usopp, Chopper, and Nami. They quickly hid behind their companions, only peeked out, cautiously watching Weiss's departure like frightened little rabbits. After Weiss left, everyone else breathed a sigh of relief, save for Luffy, who remained nonchalant. That guy, he's nothing special. Hearing Luffy's words, Nami punched Luffy on the head, tears still welling in her eyes, muttering, I thought he was going to attack us. Chapter 312 Naval Response. Law, carrying three celestial dragons, paraded through the streets of the Sybaote archipelago with such bravado, shocking countless people and profoundly impacting the perspectives. In this sea, the celestial dragons were always considered sacred and inviolable, high and mighty, yet how could they ever be treated like this? Now, being carried around like dead pigs, the sight was truly unbelievable. News spread like wildfire. Far away at Marine headquarters, Sengoku was sitting at his desk, attending to various matters, when the den mushi on his desk suddenly rang again. He frowned, reached for the phone, and listened to the anxious report from the other end, his expression darkening. After hanging up, Sengoku stared intently at Garp, who was stuffing senbei into his mouth, his anger surging. Asshole! This isn't the time to eat, Sengoku shouted, his voice echoing through the office, shaking the window slightly. However, Garp seemed oblivious to Sengoku's roar. Seeing Sengoku's exasperation, he burst into laughter, tears welling up in his eyes. His hearty laughter was particularly abrupt in the oppressive atmosphere of the office. It's just 3 pieces of trash caught. We've seen worse things happen before, Garp said nonchalantly. He was referring to the God Valley incident. That incident also saw many world-shaking events, so to Garp, the capture of these 3 celestial dragons didn't seem like a big deal. This time is different, Sengoku said solemnly, knowing full well that the severity of this incident was far greater than Garp imagined. What's different? Garp stopped laughing, picking his nose with an impatient expression. A lot of civilians saw it, Sengoku explained gravely. The celestial dragons were sacred and inviolable. This was the consensus of the sea, cultivated by the world government over 800 years. If everyone knew that the celestial dragons, like them, could be treated this way, the consequences would be disastrous. HMPH, Garp folded his arms over his chest and said with disdain, I won't protect those rubbish this time. Garp had already been deeply dissatisfied with the celestial dragon's actions, and now that he saw them thwarted, he had no desire to help. He even felt quite relieved. Sengoku knew that although Garp's words appeared lighthearted, he felt deeply troubled. After all, after Blackbeard defeated Ace, the Navy had handed him over to the Navy in exchange for a spot on the Shichibukai. To eliminate the Whitebird pirates, the Navy had even planned to publicly execute Ace. This series of events had already tormented Garp deeply. So, Garp was treating the celestial dragon's capture as pure amusement, a way to ease his inner pain. Sengoku sighed helplessly, knowing that the Navy would have to send an admiral to deal with the celestial dragon's capture. Weiss was the one who took action, so sending just one general wasn't a safe bet. Furthermore, Akanu's aggressive style made him ill-suited for a hostage rescue. After much deliberation, Sengoku ultimately decided to dispatch both Aokiji and Kizaru, hoping to successfully resolve the crisis, restore the celestial dragon's dignity, and stabilize the unrest that threatened to ripple through the ocean. Weiss leisurely found a cafe on the Sabaody archipelago and walked in. By then, the shop's owners and customers had already fled in panic after hearing the news of the celestial dragon's capture, leaving the cafe empty except for Weiss and Law. Weiss walked behind the bar with familiarity, brewing a cup of fragrant coffee for himself and Law, then sat there leisurely, as if the world roiling outside because of them had nothing to do with him. What's the use of these three people? Law couldn't help but ask. He knew Weiss never acted without a reason, and this kidnapping of the celestial dragons must have some specific purpose. Vegapunk told me a story. Weiss took a sip of his coffee and slowly recounted the story of Kuma and Bunny. His voice was calm and steady, as he recounted the complex and moving story of the two. Lo sat quietly listening, a wistful look gradually creeping into his eyes. The two's experiences bore some resemblance to his own. He had always considered Rosinante a family member, but now, he would never see him again. Whenever he thought of this, a faint sadness welled up in his heart. "Doctor, please help this father and daughter if I have the chance," Weiss said, casually kicking the three unconscious celestial dragons lying on the ground, as if they were worthless pieces of junk. "Let's just treat them as scraps and make use of them." Not long after, Law, using his keen observation haki, sensed a large number of naval forces rapidly approaching, soon surrounding the cafe. "Coming," Law whispered, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. Weiss, however, remained unhurried, leisurely sipping his coffee. The Navy wasn't a significant threat. Squeak. Just then, the door to the cafe gently opened. Aokiji walked in alone. He glanced at the celestial dragons carelessly discarded on the floor, then scratched his head and habitually muttered, "Alala, want some coffee?" Weiss smiled, inviting Aokiji as if meeting an old friend. Aokiji didn't refuse Weiss's invitation, walking straight to the table and sitting down. From the moment Aokiji entered, Lo had been watching him closely, his eyes wary. After all, Aokiji was a Navy admiral, a formidable force, and no one knew what he would do next. Weiss smiled slightly and gently pushed the steaming cup of coffee toward Aokiji. Seeing the hesitation on Aokiji's face, Weiss couldn't help but smile and said, "Don't worry, there's no poison in it." Aokiji felt a little embarrassed when Weiss said that. He cleared his throat gently, trying to ease the slightly embarrassing atmosphere, but in his heart he was secretly wondering what Weiss' purpose was in kidnapping the celestial dragons. Chapter 313 Incident. "Can you contact the 5 elders?" Weiss asked directly, without beating around the bush. Aokiji nodded silently, knowing full well that in this situation, he was likely just a messenger. Weiss, seeing this, gestured for Aokiji to contact the 5 elders immediately. Aokiji, understanding his current predicament, sighed helplessly and slowly dialed the Den Mushi. Blue. The sound of the Den Mushi was remarkably clear in the somewhat quiet cafe, each beat tingling with the tense nerves of the crowd. Click. With a soft click, the Den Mushi connected. "Aokiji, what's the situation?" Satan's slightly aged voice emanated from the Den Mushi, a hint of urgency and concern etched in his tone, clearly indicating his deep concern for the situation. Aokiji glanced up at the 3 still breathing men on the ground and replied calmly, "Things are fine." Just then, Weiss suddenly reached for the Den Mushi on the table and said into the receiver, "5 elders." There was a noticeable silence on the other end, as if they hadn't expected Weiss to answer the call so directly. After a moment, a voice came back, "What do you want?" The 5 elders weren't fools. Since Weiss hadn't killed the 3 celestial dragons immediately, it meant he was trying to negotiate. So, without further ado, they cut straight to the point. Weiss slowly stated his demands. However, the 5 elders seemed to be trying to manipulate Weiss and didn't agree immediately. Weiss wasn't going to go easy on them. With a flick of his finger, a killing curse flew out, striking Charles directly. In the blink of an eye, Charles was dead, lying straight on the ground, dead and swift. Seeing this, Aokiji felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He hadn't expected Weiss to be so decisive. Furthermore, when he struck, he didn't sense any murderous intent from him, not even a hint of foreboding. Weiss's strength and style were truly terrifying. "What's going on, Satan?" on the other end of the line, heard the commotion and hurriedly asked. "St. Charles is dead." Aokaji's voice was a little hoarse as he spoke the truth with difficulty, his heart pounding with worry about what might happen next. "You've made a mistake. I'm just informing you." Weiss's calm voice came through the den mushy, his tone devoid of any emotion, as if he had just done something insignificant. The 5 elders had never expected someone to dare speak to them like that. Their faces darkened, their anger surging. But before they could react, Weiss, without even giving them a chance to speak, simply hung up the den mushy and tossed it to Aokaji. Aokaji, clutching the den mushy, was momentarily bewildered. He didn't know how to face the 5 elders' wrath, nor how this situation would unfold. However, less than a minute later, the den mushy rang again. Aokaji answered the call. Satan's voice, laced with suppressed anger, said, "Deal." With those 2 words, he hung up without hesitation. Clearly, despite his anger, he understood the situation was overwhelming, so he had no choice but to agree to Weiss's terms. "I'll leave these 2 men to you," Weiss declared, and then he and Law swaggered out of the cafe. The Marines gathered outside the cafe swallowed nervously upon seeing Weiss and Law emerge. Though they all held guns, without orders to fire, no one dared to act rashly. They could only watch Weiss and Law calmly depart. When Weiss was out of sight, the Marines breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Kuma, with his immense strength, sent the Straw Hat Pirates flying one by one. Even without the aid of the pacifists, the Straw Hat Pirates were gradually losing ground against Kuma, ultimately being routed, leaving only Luffy struggling to hold on. Elsewhere, Raleigh, despite his best efforts, held off Kizaru. Raleigh, however, was aging and gradually losing ground to Kizaru. As the battle dragged on, Rayleigh gradually lost ground, and the situation became increasingly dire. At this critical moment, Weiss and Law suddenly appeared. Their presence instantly alerted Rayleigh, Kizaru, Kuma, and Luffy. After all, Weiss was now a renowned 4 emperor, his every move closely watched. No one knew what twists and turns his presence would bring. "Kuma," Weiss called out, his gaze fixed squarely on Kuma. Kuma's poker face remained expressionless, and he simply stared at Weiss silently. Weiss casually tossed a den mushy to Kuma, saying, "Your old friend wants to see you." Kuma took it and put it to his ear. Vegapunk's familiar voice emanated from it, recounting the entire story in detail. Kuma listened silently, his massive frame motionless, like a silent mountain. "So, Kuma, you and Bonnie are free," Vegapunk's voice boomed loud enough for everyone to hear. Kuma, still struggling to process the sudden surprise, froze in place, his eyes filled with disbelief and bewilderment, as if he couldn't believe the freedom he'd never dreamed of had suddenly arrived. "Give my companion back to me." Luffy didn't care. Seizing the opportunity, he mustered all his strength and launched a powerful punch at Kuma. However, Kuma simply blocked Luffy's blow with a single, unhurried hand. Then, with a flick of his right hand, Luffy vanished from the spot. "Thank you," Kuma's gentle voice echoed, a stark contrast to his massive, slightly imposing figure, leaving one feeling somewhat surprised. He truly didn't know how to thank Weiss enough, the favor was too great for him. "Bonnie's on this island. If you have time, you can bring her to Dressrosa. Vegapunk misses your time together," Weiss said to Kuma with a smile. Kuma bowed deeply in thanks, then vanished from the spot. Seeing this, Kizaru realized that today's matter could no longer continue, and he transformed into a streak of golden light, vanishing in an instant. Weiss then left with Law. Rayleigh was left alone. He gazed in the direction the others had left, sighing softly, his heart filled with emotion. Today's sudden turn of events had truly thrown him through so many unexpected events. Chapter 314 Fishman Island. It's like a fairy tale. When Luo first laid eyes on Fishman Island, he couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. The world is so vast, truly filled with wonders. Who could have imagined that such a wondrous island could exist hidden thousands of meters beneath the ocean? Fishman Island is completely surrounded by a massive, double-layered, semicircular bubble film shield, a transparent dome that securely protects the entire island. Between the 2 shields lies an air layer, a clever design that creates a habitable environment within. Although Fishman Island lies deep beneath the ocean, it possesses a unique sky and clouds, as if carved out of a separate, isolated world within the depths. This is all thanks to a giant tree growing near Fishman Island, Sun Tree Eve, possessing the magical ability to transmit sunlight from the surface to Fishman Island. Even in the depths of the ocean, Fishman Island is bathed in sunlight and experiences a cycle of day and night. The locals were grateful for this phenomenon, even describing it as a blessing from the sun. Whether the island was a natural wonder or a carefully crafted creation remains uncertain. Fishman Island is most famous not for its exquisite pastries or its picturesque scenery, but for its youthful and beautiful mermaids. Mermaids are extremely rare on the sea, and their rarity makes them a glittering goldmine for slave traders. At auction, a young and beautiful mermaid often fetches staggering prices. Driven by the desire for profit, slave traders resort to any means necessary to capture mermaids, forcing them to remain confined to the sea. This, in turn, drives the price of mermen at auction ever higher. For a long time, humans on the sea have viewed mermen and mermen as alien and discriminated against them. This discrimination and unfair treatment has fostered a resentment towards humans among some mermen and merpeople. When Weiss and Law arrived at Fishman Island, they could clearly sense the fear and deep disgust in the gazes of the local merlocks and merpeople. "We don't seem to be welcome," Law said, frowning slightly as he watched the fearful and disgusted looks from the surrounding merlocks and merpeople. "It doesn't matter," Weiss said with a nonchalant expression. He had come to Fishman Island for a specific purpose, and it wasn't for the merlocks or merpeople themselves. He truly cared about Sun Tree Eve. As soon as Weiss and Law set foot on Fishman Island, their whereabouts were quickly reported to the Dragon Palace by the island's highly vigilant soldiers. At that moment, King Neptune of Fishman Island was entertaining guests in the Dragon Palace. Upon hearing this report, he was startled and accidentally knocked over his wineglass, spilling the wine onto the table. "What happened?" Marco, with his pineapple-haired hairdo, saw this and hurriedly asked with concern. "What's the problem?" He had come to Fishman Island on an important mission and naturally didn't want anything unexpected to happen at this time. Neptune looked hesitant. He opened his mouth, but didn't know how to start. Marco had come on behalf of the Whitebird Pirates, seeking help. The Whitebird Pirates planned to coat their ships on Fishman Island and then directly attack the Marine headquarters. Fishman Island and the Whitebird Pirates had always maintained a good relationship, and Fishman Island would provide many conveniences for the Whitebird Pirates. Moreover, Fishman Island's secluded environment made it difficult for the Navy to obtain intelligence on the Whitebird Pirates from there, making it an ideal preparation location for the Whitebird Pirates' plans. Since Neptune was in trouble, Marco figured that since he was there, he might as well help him solve it. However, Neptune's hesitation made Marco puzzled, wondering what had happened to put Neptune in such a difficult position. Neptune hesitated for a moment, still unsure how to begin. After all, Weiss's appearance was no small matter, and he needed to carefully consider his words. Actually, Marco's brow furrowed, a solemn expression on his face. "It's him. This is a tough situation." Weiss's name was legendary, her mysterious and powerful strength intimidating many. Marco's mind raced to consider Weiss's purpose for coming to Fishman Island. After all, at this crucial juncture when the Whitebird Pirates were planning a raid on Marine headquarters, any unexpected event could derail the entire plan, so no mistakes were allowed. "No matter what, I must find out his purpose," Marco silently resolved. While Weiss was formidable, he was confident in his own abilities. With the power of the Phoenix Fruit, he was confident he could escape unscathed from any encounter with Weiss. With this thought, Marco erupted in cyan flames, instantly transforming into his phoenix form. Which way did he go? Neptune quickly pointed in one direction and said, "There." He went to the Sea Forest. The Sea Forest was a rather special place on Fishman Island, home to many mysterious legends and important historical relics. Marco couldn't help but wonder if Weiss's visit to the Sea Forest was related to these. Weiss was concentrating on collecting samples from the Sun Tree Eve, his movements meticulous and cautious, thinking that with these samples, he might actually be able to grow this magical tree in his own world, perhaps bringing about some extraordinary changes there as well. Just as he carefully placed the collected samples and prepared to leave, he suddenly heard a whoosh-whoosh sound, approaching at an extremely fast speed from afar. Marco flashed his enormous wings, swept by a powerful gust of air, and flew towards them at a rapid speed. In a flash, he appeared before Weiss and Law, his body ablaze with cyan flames, dazzling in the dim sea forest. "Phoenix Marco, why are you here?" Law frowned slightly, puzzled. He hadn't expected to run into Marco here. "Fishman Island flies the flag of the Whitebird Pirates," Marco said gravely. He had come here out of concern that Weiss's presence would affect the Whitebird pirates' plans, and so he hurried over to find out Weiss's intentions. "I'll leave him to you," Weiss said calmly, looking at Law. Law didn't show any sign of refusing Weiss's order. A flicker of excitement flashed in his eyes, and he thought to himself that battling a master like Marco would be a great opportunity to test his own strength. Chapter 315 Fighting Room. Law quickly activated his Opera no Mi's ability, attempting to control the situation and create favorable conditions. Unfortunately, Law was far too slow compared to Marco. "How could I possibly let you activate your ability?" Marco thought to himself. Information about Law's abilities and fighting style had already spread throughout the pirate world, and all factions were well aware of his fighting style. So, Marco had decided from the outset that he would not allow Law to activate his ability smoothly. With a sudden swipe of his massive wings, Marco's body moved like lightning, instantly delivering a powerful kick towards Law. This kick, imbued with immense power and incredibly fast, left Law no time to fully activate his ability. He could only hastily gather his haki into his scabbard, attempting to block Marco's powerful blow. With a resounding bang, Law was sent flying, his body arcing through the air before landing heavily on the ground not far away. The disparity in power between the two was clearly immense. Even after just this one round, Law was at a complete disadvantage. Marco didn't press his advantage to pursue Law, instead quickly focusing all his attention on Weiss. At that moment, figuring out Weiss's purpose for coming to Fishman Island was paramount. "Wes Erwin, what is your purpose for coming to Fishman Island?" Marco stared at Weiss intently, his tone tinged with questioning. However, Weiss simply stood there silently, offering no response, as if he hadn't heard Marco at all. "Answer me," Marco raised his voice, emphasizing Weiss's lack of response. Just then, Marco sensed a sudden, dangerous aura approaching. Using his keen observation haki, he instantly ducked his head. Swish! A burst of air cannon shot out like a sharp arrow, piercing through the nearby tree trunks and rocks. Huge holes instantly appeared in the punctured areas, sending rubble and wood chips flying everywhere. After being kicked away, Law quickly recovered. While Marco was focused on Weiss, he quietly gathered his strength and launched a sneak attack, aiming the tip of his blade at Marco's head and unleashing a powerful air cannon. Tisk! Sharp observation haki. Seeing his sneak attack so easily evaded by Marco, Law felt a touch of disappointment, but also no surprise. After all, he knew Marco was no easy opponent, his immense strength and extensive combat experience evident. Although Marco had held back on that kick, he expected Law to be nearly depleted of his combat effectiveness after such an attack. He didn't want to risk provoking a formidable foe like Weiss for the Whitebird pirates by striking a fatal blow, so he didn't use his full strength. "Don't look down on me." Completely enraged by Marco's disdain, Law abruptly rose from the ground, his eyes gleaming with determination as he unhesitatingly activated his ability once more. What a troublesome brat, Marco sighed inwardly at Luo's stubbornness. He knew he had to take it seriously, or else he might actually fall at the hands of this brat. And so, a fierce battle ensued. Minutes passed, and Luo lay panting on the ground, sweat dripping from his forehead. His body trembled slightly from exhaustion, clearly drained of all his strength. Marco, however, remained unharmed. He stood there, his expression calm. The previous battle had been nothing more than a relaxing warm-up. Seeing the vast gap between himself and a true master, Luo didn't let it discourage him. Instead, his eyes solidified his resolve to become stronger. He believed this defeat was only temporary. He would strive to improve himself, and one day, he would impress those who looked down on him. "How do you feel?" Weiss looked at Luo lying on the ground. Luo turned away proudly, ignoring Weiss, still feeling a bit resentful about his recent defeat. Weiss didn't seem embarrassed. He shrugged slightly and turned to Marco. "Thank you, just tell me your purpose." Marco looked at Weiss with a scrutinizing look in his eyes. "For the Sun Tree, Eve," West replied calmly. "Is that simple?" Marco asked, somewhat puzzled. He had assumed Weiss had some more complex or hidden purpose for coming to Fishman Island. "That's it," Weiss reassuredly. Marco breathed a sigh of relief at Weiss's response. He knew that Weiss, while somewhat secretive, wouldn't lie about something like this. Just as Marco was about to turn and leave, Weiss suddenly spoke, a word that stopped him in his tracks. Over the New World's waters, the wind howled as a giant cyan bird streaked across the sea like a flash of lightning. It was Marco in his phoenix form, hastily heading towards the Moby Dick. "Hey, can't you just slow down?" Luo clutched his hat, which threatened to fly off in the sea breeze. The strong wind nearly closed his eyes, forcing them to squint, and he grumbled non-stop. But Marco had no desire to slow down. He was completely focused on getting back to the Moby Dick. So, instead of slowing down, he sped up even faster, the cyan flames burning even more fiercely. "Hold on a little longer, we're almost there," Marco shouted, his voice clearly audible over the howling sea breeze. Atop the Moby Dick's observation tower, Star was intently observing the surrounding waters. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he excitedly shouted, "We're back!" This shout instantly livened up the already bustling deck, and the crew rushed toward the bow. Soon, the deck was filled with people. Diamond Jaws, Bramank, Namur, and all the other captains of the Whitebird pirates were present. They gathered around the bow, their eyes fixed on the direction Marco was flying from. Finally, Marco, swept by a powerful gust of air, landed on the deck of the Moby Dick. As he touched the ground, the azure flames on his body gradually died down, and he returned to his human form. Seeing this, everyone immediately gathered around him, questioning him. Chapter 316 Conversation. Is there really a solution? The Whitebird pirates gathered around Law, their eyes filled with anticipation and confusion. Everyone chatted back and forth, even temporarily ignoring Weiss's presence. Gullah, a resounding laugh, like thunder, echoed, its unmistakable chuckle instantly silencing everyone. "Dad," the crew shouted. Whitebird slowly emerged from the captain's cabin. Though the years had left their mark, and he looked older, his innate aura remained undiminished, a force to be reckoned with. His gaze slowly settled on Weiss, a scrutinizing look in his eyes as he asked, "Did you kill Linolin?" Whitebird, a former companion of Big Mom, knew her strength all too well. He knew that even he couldn't guarantee a complete defeat. Now, upon seeing Weiss, he knew the young man's strength might have surpassed his own. Weiss simply nodded calmly, offering no further explanation. To be a pirate is to kill or be killed, even if you're king. Whitebird seemed to be lamenting the harsh rules of the pirate world, his tone revealing the open-mindedness of someone who had experienced many hardships. "Dad," Marco said anxiously, "there's a way to treat your injuries." He hoped Whitebird would seize this opportunity to heal them. However, Whitebird simply grabbed the wine flask, tilted his head back, and took a long swig, saying nonchalantly, "They're just some old injuries." He clearly didn't want to be examined or treated by a stranger. He had fought a lifetime, suffering countless injuries and countless battles, often without timely treatment. In his youth, his monstrous strength had allowed him to barely keep fighting. But now, with age and declining physical fitness, those long simmering injuries had erupted, sometimes leaving him unable to sleep all night. Moreover, at this critical moment, on the verge of war with the Marine headquarters, even if healing would take time, he felt he didn't have that much time to waste. "I appreciate your kindness," Whitebird waved, ready to send them off, unwilling to dwell on the matter. But Weiss interrupted him. "Can we find a quiet place, Dad?" Marco pleaded even more earnestly, pleading with Whitebird for treatment. He couldn't bear to see his father suffer from his injuries. The other crew members echoed his plea, treating Whitebird like their own father. Since there was now a chance to heal his father, they had to try, no matter what. "Foolish son," Whitebird sighed helplessly at the crew's sole concern. Ultimately, unable to resist, he temporarily agreed. Then, Whitebird led Weiss and Law into the captain's cabin. Marco, Juz, and Vista, worried, accompanied them into the cabin. The cabin was spacious. To accommodate a man of Whitebird's size, every detail was custom-made, from the tables and chairs to the beds, meticulously crafted to Whitebird's specifications. "You're determined to die and have no intention of returning alive, right?" Weiss's words were framed as questions, but his tone was resolute, as if he knew everything. Marco, Juz, and Vista had barely sat down when Weiss's words suddenly jumped to their feet, their faces filled with disbelief and anger. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Marco's eyes widened, and he shouted at Weiss in a rage. He simply couldn't accept what Weiss was saying. However, Whitebird, the person involved, seemed the calmest. "Dad? He's talking nonsense, right?" Marco glanced at Whitebird eagerly, his eyes filled with hope. Hoping that Whitebird would immediately deny Weiss's words. "I didn't expect an outsider would see through it." Whitebird sighed softly and frankly admitted that what Weiss said was true. "Why?" Marco's agitation intensified, his voice trembling with emotion. He couldn't understand why his father would have such thoughts. Whitebird opened his mouth, unsure how to respond. If he told the truth, he feared hurting the hearts of his adopted sons, who viewed him as a father figure, but if he didn't, he couldn't hide the situation anymore. Weiss, however, had no such concerns and spoke directly. Of course it's because you're too weak. Weiss's words were blunt and harsh. We're too weak. Marco couldn't believe his ears. They were leaders of the Whitebird pirates, renowned pirates on the seas. How could they be called weak? Sengoku, Garp, Akanyu, Aokaji. Weiss read out the names slowly, his expressions growing more serious with each name. With 16 vice admirals from Marine headquarters, not to mention the other experts from the world government, do you, the Whitebird pirates, have a chance of victory? Weiss's gaze swept over the group, a cold, scrutinizing look in his eyes. Silence, still silence. Everyone knew they had no chance of success against such a lineup. They weren't fools, but their admiration for Whitebird had blinded them to the fact that he was already an old man. This admiration also led them to misjudge their own strength and the formidable strength of their opponents. Gulila, Whitebird suddenly burst into laughter, attempting to lighten the oppressive atmosphere. He declared, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything," but this didn't reassure Marco and the other two. They knew the risks of going to war with the Marine headquarters were too great, it would be a life-or-death struggle. But to rescue Weiss, they had already made up their minds to spare no expense, even their own lives. Weiss stared at Whitebird closely and continued to ask, "What is the best outcome you expected?" "Humph, what a cunning kid." Whitebird said this, but he didn't intend to hide it. He slowly said, "I die in battle and rescue Weiss, and the Whitebird pirates escape unscathed." Dad, Marco and the other two's eyes suddenly turned red when they heard this. How could they accept such an outcome, letting Dad go to die? This was something they didn't want to see no matter what. Chapter 317 Agree. Too naive? Weiss shook her head, her expression calm and serious. "You're only 70% of your peak strength right now." Whitebird didn't object, but remained silent for a moment, tacitly accepting Weiss's words as true. "The best outcome is that you and Ace die in battle, and if half of the Whitebird pirates escape Marine headquarters, that would be a victory." Weiss continued bluntly analyzing the upcoming battle. His words were like a bucket of cold water, ruthlessly extinguishing the lingering spark of hope in everyone's hearts. Marco, Jozu, Vista, and Whitebird of the Whitebird pirates were momentarily at a loss for words. Weiss's words, though harsh, were also incredibly realistic. They all knew that facing the terrifyingly powerful Marine headquarters, this battle would be far more difficult than they had imagined. "I'm confident I can heal your injuries and restore you to your peak form," Weiss said, changing the subject and offering a tempting offer. Whitebird's heart skipped a beat. If his strength could be even a little stronger, his chances of victory against Marine headquarters would naturally increase. However, he also understood that there was no such thing as a free lunch, and Weiss's words must have a purpose. "Your purpose?" Whitebird asked in a deep voice, his gaze blazing at Weiss. "Your body," Weiss replied crisply, without a hint of concealment. Clang! Vista instantly drew his two swords, his eyes filled with anger and vigilance, and prepared to charge at Weiss. Jozu also activated his ability without hesitation, his body gleaming with a diamond-like light, ready to strike. Marco's face turned even more pale. He had never imagined Weiss's purpose was this. It was a blasphemy against them. Just as the three were about to recklessly attack, Whitebird reached out to stop them. Whitebird glared at Weiss fiercely and asked in a deep voice, "Do you know what you're saying?" His eyes seemed to say that if Weiss said anything wrong, he would not be polite and would strike immediately. Seeing this, Law, standing nearby, broke out in a cold sweat. He gripped his weapon tightly, ready to join the fray if a clash broke out. Weiss, however, remained calm in his seat, his expression nonchalant, as if unfazed by any danger. He looked at Whitebird and spoke slowly. Even if the Rock's pirates were resurrected, they wouldn't be a match for Marine headquarters, let alone you alone. Whitebird sighed softly at Weiss's words, knowing Weiss was right. Marine headquarters was now formidable, and no pirate group could stand a chance against them. And wasn't the Navy's fussing over this public execution all for his own life? As long as he was alive, Marine headquarters would not let him off the hook. "We need to discuss this," Whitebird said to Weiss and Law after a moment's silence. Weiss and Law tactfully gave the four of them space, then left the room and waited quietly outside. Half an hour later, Marco emerged dejected from the room, his eyes visibly red and swollen, evidently from recent tears. He weakly addressed Weiss-in-law, "Come in." Daddy agrees. As Weiss-in-law entered the room, they saw Vista and Jaws's eyes, also red. It was clear they had just gone through a fierce inner struggle and a painful decision. "I agree. After I die, my body will remain yours," Whitebird said casually, as if referring to someone else's body. "These idiots won't stop you," Jaws and Vista glared at Weiss. Their eyes filled with resentment and anger. They couldn't accept this outcome, but they couldn't resist Whitebird's decision. Weiss ignored their gazes and simply said, "Then we can begin treatment now." Then, everyone arrived at a Moby Dick's medical room. Whitebird slowly lay down on the massive operating table, his massive frame almost dominating it. Entering the medical room, Law glanced over the medical records, taller than a man, and couldn't help but exclaim, "How on earth did you survive?" The thick stack of medical records revealed Whitebird's body was riddled with wounds. The fact that he was still breathing and still able to exhale was a miracle in itself. As the ship's doctor, Marco, who was naturally most familiar with Whitebird's condition, explained his various injuries in detail. As Law listened, he activated the power of the Opnomi and began a more detailed examination of Whitebird. For him, the Opnomi was more convenient and reliable than any other instrument, allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of Whitebird's internal condition. Weiss, too, was busy, using his magical probing skills to examine Whitebird's body. They quickly concluded that Whitebird's continued survival was a result of Marco's meticulous care. His current physical condition was so poor that he couldn't undergo conventional surgery. Even the slightest mistake could trigger a chain reaction, causing all his old injuries to flare up, potentially killing Whitebird instantly. "That's why I haven't operated on Dad." Marco's voice was filled with endless pain. He pressed his hands tightly against his eyes, as if to block out the harsh reality, to shield himself from the reality of his father's dire condition. "My healing abilities can only be used on myself." Marco's heart was filled with regret and helplessness. He wished so much that Whitebird had consumed the phoenix fruit, which granted him powerful self-healing abilities. Then, perhaps his father wouldn't have to suffer this torment. Law frowned, concentrating on the surgical plan. After all, others might be unable to undergo surgery due to Whitebird's poor condition, but he possessed the miraculous power of the operation fruit, so he theoretically had the potential to perform a miracle. However, the crux of the matter was that Whitebird was nearing the end of his life, extremely weak. The surgery would inevitably involve significant bleeding, and given his current condition, it was highly likely to kill him. Conventional medical advice dictated that Whitebird should be allowed at least a year of proper recuperation, waiting for his condition to improve and his functions to recover before he could possibly withstand the risks of surgery. However, time simply did not permit this. With the Navy's public execution imminent, every minute and every second was precious, leaving no time for the necessary recovery. With this in mind, the two men simultaneously turned their gazes to Weiss. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318 Before the War. Since Weiss had offered Whitebird's body in exchange for his treatment, he must have a solution to Whitebird's dreaded condition, preventing him from undergoing surgery. Weiss calmly pulled several potions from his pocket, handed them to Whitebird, and said, "Drink this." Without hesitation, Whitebird reached out his large hand, grabbed the entire potion, and gulped it all down in one gulp. As soon as the potion entered his mouth, Whitebird felt a warm current spread through his body, a sensation that made him let out a long, comfortable sigh. The pain that had been piercing his body began to subside, and he hadn't felt this relaxed and comfortable in years. Another examination of Whitebird's body revealed that all his indicators had met the criteria for surgery. This was a truly surprising turn of events, and Marco's anxiety eased slightly. Then, with Law as the lead surgeon, and Marco assisting, they began this crucial operation. The atmosphere in the operating room was tense and solemn. Law was completely focused on unleashing the power of the Opno, his gaze never slacking, each movement precise, knowing full well that the success of this operation depended on great importance. Marco also worked in perfect harmony, helping to handle any unexpected situations. Just like that, a day and a night passed, and the arduous operation was finally completed. Law and Weiss slowly emerged from the operating room. Weiss appeared relaxed, but Law, unlike him, was completely exhausted. The intense operation required him to maintain his focus for even a second, and the constant use of the no had taken a tremendous toll on his stamina. If it weren't for the significant improvement in his stamina from training with Cyrus, he might not have been able to endure this operation. At this moment, Law wanted nothing more than to find a place to get some sleep. He was utterly exhausted. "How is it going?" The operating room was already crowded with Whitebird pirates, their faces filled with anxiety and anticipation. Seeing Law and Weiss emerge, they eagerly asked. The operation was a success. "Marco is inside caring for him," Law replied weakly. "Great." Upon hearing this news, everyone erupted in joy, eager to rush into the operating room to see Whitebird. However, just as they were about to move, Law stopped them. Law weakly said, "Whitebird is sleeping soundly. It's best not to disturb him." The crew knew Whitebird hadn't had a good night's sleep in ages, and now he finally had a chance to rest. So, they quickly arranged rooms for Law and Weiss to rest, then quietly waited outside the operating room, continuing to watch over Whitebird. Law hadn't slept for an hour when he was awakened by the bustling sounds outside. He rubbed his eyes drowsily, then listened carefully. It was the sounds of a party. When he reached the deck, he was met with a bustling scene. The Whitebird pirates were holding a grand banquet, and not just the Whitebird pirates, but all 43 of their affiliated pirate groups had also arrived. The sea was filled with a sea of pirate ships. Whitebird and Weiss sat in the center, like the moon surrounded by stars. They seemed to be chatting, each wearing a faint smile, the atmosphere appearing harmonious. "Can you bear to part with these children?" Weiss asked, looking at the bustling banquet before her. "Gulala." Whitebird laughed his signature laugh, then said with a broad expression, "The Navy won't let go of the remnants of my era." His gaze slowly swept over the reveling crew, a look of both kindness and a hint of resignation. On this vast ocean, the former pirate King Roger had passed away, and the Golden Lion and the Red Earl had gradually faded. Now, only he remained active, a natural thorn in the side of the Navy, who had long sought to eliminate him. Whitebird was pleased with his children. After so many years of experience, they were now capable of standing on their own. So, for now, he simply wanted to savor these last moments of joy with his children. As for the future, he had already made peace with it. The grand banquet dragged on for a long time, as everyone feasted, drank, laughed, and danced, thoroughly enjoying this rare moment of reunion and joy. However, midway through the banquet, Weiss and Law quietly left. They knew that the bustle and the emotional bonds within this place ultimately belonged to the Whitebird pirates, not to them. In recent days, news of the Navy's planned public execution of the Whitebird Pirates' 2nd Division captain had spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the world. Everyone knew that Whitebird had always cherished his companions, and the bonds within his pirate group were deep and family-like. The Navy's planned public execution of a prominent member of the Whitebird Pirates was undoubtedly a blatant provocation, and the Whitebird Pirates would surely not sit idly by. A thrilling battle between Marine headquarters and the Whitebird Pirates was certain. Opinions on this impending event were divided. Some were particularly excited upon hearing the news. Perhaps they deeply hated pirates and hoped the Navy would use this opportunity to strike hard at them, bringing peace to the seas. Or perhaps they simply enjoyed witnessing such intense conflict, eager to witness a war that would shake the world. Others, however, expressed unease. They knew that if such a war broke out, the impact would extend far beyond the Navy and the Whitebird Pirates. The smoke of war would spread, ripple throughout the world, potentially upending the balance of power. No one knew what would unfold next. What's wrong with this world? Big Mom's pirates have just fallen, and now the Navy is going after the Whitebird Pirates. Some couldn't help but sigh, as if feeling a deep sense of powerlessness and confusion in the face of this relentless turmoil. The more pirates killed, the better. Others held even more extreme views, believing that pirates were the primary culprits disrupting world peace. Only by reducing their numbers could the world become a better place. However, no matter how diverse their opinions, one thing they all understood was that once the war between the Navy and the Whitebird Pirates began, the world would be transformed. The balance of power might be reshuffled, and the seemingly stable situation would no longer exist. Marine headquarters was actively preparing for the impending war. They had recruited a full 100,000 elite naval personnel from various branches. These elites had been carefully selected and rigorously trained, and each possessed formidable strength. The three admirals had all returned to headquarters to command. As the Navy's highest forces, these three would play a crucial role in this war. The entire Marine headquarters was united in their determination to win this battle. As if they had already witnessed the Whitebird pirates' crushing defeat and foresaw that after this war, the Navy's prestige on the seas would reach a new peak. Chapter 319 Dinner. Until the day of the execution, the entire world seemed gripped by a chorus of tension. The Navy, ingeniously, broadcast the execution live, revealing the ceremony before everyone's eyes. During the broadcast, the Navy announced a series of shocking revelations, the most shocking of which was the revelation that Fire Fist Ace was actually the biological son of Pirate King Roger. Until then, ordinary Marines and the general public were completely unaware of this fact. Only then did they suddenly understand why the Navy had made such a grand gesture to execute Ace. For the Navy, the bloodline of Pirate King Roger could not be allowed to continue on the seas. It was a potential threat, a constant threat to the order the Navy maintained. Therefore, Ace's execution was more symbolic than practical. The Navy intended to demonstrate to the entire pirate world their absolute authority and their uncompromising stance against any threat to their rule. At first, everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly according to the Navy's carefully orchestrated plan. The Marine headquarters had made thorough preparations, from recruiting numerous elite Marines to recalling the three admirals, and they were brimming with confidence. However, they had ultimately miscalculated one key aspect: Whitebird's strength. What's going on? Why has Whitebird's strength returned to its peak? As Whitebird's longtime rival, Sengoku, with his keen insight, had accurately assessed Whitebird's current strength the moment he struck. After all, a wounded and weakened Whitebird was completely different from a Whitebird in his prime. In his prime, Whitebird's immense power was enough to intimidate any opponent. What on earth has happened? Sengoku felt a sense of foreboding. Things were heading in the direction the Marines least wanted to see. Furthermore, the situation with the Shichibuke was also dire. The personnel were already incomplete, and those present were not contributing their full efforts. They were clearly slacking off in this battle, failing to play their full roles. This undoubtedly posed a significant obstacle to the Marines' operational plans. Even more humiliating for the Navy was the fact that Whitebird had easily detected Squard's backstab attempt. This dramatic scene was even broadcast to the world via Den Mushi. How despicable! Navy, those who witnessed the scene roared with condemnation. Instigating a son to assassinate his father, what's the difference between them and us pirates? Some also questioned the Navy's dishonorable tactics, despicably exploiting family ties to achieve their own ends. However, Sengoku ignored these external skepticisms. The most important thing to him at this moment was that Whitebird was completely enraged. The bond between Whitebird and his adopted sons was incredibly deep, a sore spot for him. The Navy's unscrupulous attempts to sow discord between them were undoubtedly playing with fire. Whitebird hadn't felt this angry in a long time. Once he was enraged, the power he unleashed was truly formidable, causing Sengoku to worry deeply about the outcome of the upcoming battle. Whitebird suddenly sank his massive body downward, causing the majestic Moby Dick to rock violently. Half the bow instantly sank into the sea, sending a massive splash. Then, using the force of the downward plunge, Whitebird leaped high into the air with a leap as quick as a stork. His figure, like a soaring eagle, traced a magnificent arc through the air, passing directly through the defensive lines of the Shichibuke and the vice admirals of Marine headquarters, and hurled itself towards the square like a cannonball. Whitebird's arms bulged with muscles, swelling like hills. His signature Kyusugalkari sword gleamed with a chilling gleam in his grasp. He swirled his immensely powerful conqueror's haki around Kyusugalkari. For a moment, an aura of sheer terror, centered around him, spread outward like a tidal wave. The entire battlefield fell silent, and everyone was overwhelmed by the aura, their breathing quickening. This is bad. Sengoku's face darkened upon seeing this. Unable to contain himself any longer, he was about to intervene to stop Whitebird's unstoppable attack. However, at this moment, Akainu stepped forward fearlessly. His stern face shone with determination, his eyes blazing with fighting spirit. "You're not even close, lava brat," Whitebird roared, gripping Kyusugalkari with both hands, raising it high before slashing down fiercely. This strike embodied his immense rage and immense power, seemingly cleaving everything inside and two. Akainu, not to be outdone, swiftly raised his fist, blazing like magma, to meet Whitebird's blade. Fist and blade didn't collide directly, but in the instant they were about to make contact, The air between them seemed to be compressed to a point of sheer mass, forming a transparent barrier. Immediately afterwards, with a resounding boom, the ground beneath the entire Marine headquarters cracked open, the cracks spreading like a spider web. The Navy's carefully constructed defenses and deployments were instantly shattered. Countless Marines and pirates were blown away by the powerful shockwave, scattered through the air like leaves in the wind, screaming in agony. Akainu fought back fiercely, but ultimately, he was succumbing to Whitebird's powerful blow. His body streaked across the sky like a meteor, finally coming to a stop after heavily crushing countless buildings. Akainu's mouth was now spurting blood, clearly severely wounded. "You actually accused me of betraying my own child?" Whitebird's rage burned fiercely, showing no sign of waning. His eyes were red, like an enraged beast, as he glared fiercely at the Marines. "Clean your necks, Marines," Whitebird roared again, then punched the air with both fists. The air seemed like fragile glass, with several clear cracks appearing instantly and continuing to expand. Then, an even more shocking scene occurred. The sea surrounding the entire Marine headquarters seemed to be pulled by some immense force, and the water began to pour madly, like a waterfall flowing backwards. The previously calm sea surface was even more turbulent, and the waves surged towards the Marine headquarters like a wall. Whitebird was planning to sink the entire Marine headquarters to the bottom of the sea. He was completely furious, and the destructive aura that frightened everyone present was terrified. Chapter 320 Take Action. Alala Aokiji let out his signature cry, swiftly unleashing his power to instantly freeze the turbulent sea around him. The waters, once threatening to drown Marine headquarters, quickly formed a thick layer of ice under Aokiji's freezing power, narrowly preventing the headquarters from sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Meanwhile, Whitebird, with his immense strength and unstoppable momentum, had successfully stormed to the execution platform. Standing in his way were only Sengoku and Garp, two of the Navy's top experts. Sengoku rolled up his sleeves without hesitation, ready for battle. Garp, on the other hand, wore a torn expression. As Ace's grandfather, he sincerely hoped his grandson would be saved. However, as a Marine, he shouldered the Navy's responsibilities and mission. In this situation, he was truly torn, unsure of what to do. "Just stay here," Sengoku observed his old friend's agonizing expression, understanding his current feelings. He spoke, not wanting to embarrass Garp at this moment. With that, a dazzling golden light began to emanate from Sengoku's body, and his form gradually transformed, ultimately transforming into the form of a gigantic Buddha. With a single thrust, the colossal Buddha thrust forward, head-on blocking the onrushing Whitebird. At this moment, the Navy's three admirals, Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru, also converged. Instantly, the Navy's four top masters united to attack Whitebird, their powerful aura emanating from them, rending the air around them. However, facing such a formidable force, Whitebird remained undaunted. The battle instantly reached its climax. Meanwhile, members of the Whitebird pirates, along with the prisoners who had escaped from the deep-sea prison, united like a raging torrent, charging towards Marine headquarters. Their presence undoubtedly placed even greater pressure on the Navy. A series of unexpected events unfolded, completely disrupting the Navy's carefully planned deployment. Furthermore, a further headache loomed. Weiss had abducted Vegapunk. Vegapunk was a crucial scientific force within the Navy, and his scientific forces and pacifists could have played a vital role in this battle. His abduction, coupled with the ongoing problems and inaction of the Shichibukai, undoubtedly significantly reduced the Navy's combat effectiveness. However, among these numerous uncertainties, the most significant and unstable factor was the Straw Hat Kid, Luffy. Just like in the original story, Luffy, with his tenacious will and deep friendship for Ace, overcame all obstacles and ultimately successfully rescued Ace. This immediately boosted the morale of the pirates, with cheers and shouts rising one after another. Whitebird breathed a sigh of relief, realizing his goal had been achieved. However, he knew it was not time to relax. To ensure the safe evacuation of his children, he decided to shoulder the entire task alone. Whitebird swung his hands violently, unleashing the power of the Tremor Fruit. A powerful force erupted, instantly shattering Marineford in two. The immense force toppled surrounding buildings and created massive cracks in the ground. Dad, the members of the Whitebird pirates, watching this scene, immediately had a bad feeling. They knew their father was going to face the Navy alone, buying them time to evacuate. Sure enough, When Whitebird gave his final orders, he urged everyone to evacuate immediately and leave him alone. Everyone burst into tears, especially Ace, who felt the most guilt and heartbreak, knowing that all this chaos and danger was his fault. Seeing this, Marco, Vista, and Josu rushed forward to grab Ace, trying to get him away. But Ace couldn't break free. He knelt down, tears welling in his eyes, and bid Whitebird a final farewell. Afterward, Whitebird, free of all worries, threw himself into a desperate struggle. Alone, he wielded the devastating power of the Tremor fruit, swinging his arms again and again, each strike carrying a force that shook the earth and sky. He forcibly fended off wave after wave of the Navy's attacks, buying precious time for the pirates' retreat. "We can't let Fire Fist Ace escape," Akanu's gaze stern, a resolute expression in his eyes. Without hesitation, he broke away from the fierce battle with Whitebird and sprinted in pursuit of Ace. "Don't even think about it," Whitebird roared, swung his long sword with overwhelming force, and swept it towards Akanu, attempting to stop his pursuit. However, Sengoku blocked the fierce blow in time. In this momentary delay, the other two admirals quickly surrounded Whitebird, joining Sengoku in a tight circle, making it difficult for Whitebird to escape and support Ace. In a matter of moments, Akanu, with his swift speed, caught up with the Whitebird pirates. At this point, despite the immense strength of each member of the Whitebird pirates, neither Marco's Phoenix Fruit-powered aura abilities nor the other captain's uniquely powerful abilities could effectively stop Akanu's relentless pursuit and immense power. Akanu approached Ace and began to verbally provoke him. Ace, known for his straightforward character and deep sense of loyalty, was instantly enraged by Akanu's slander and defamation of Whitebird. Determined to defend Whitebird's dignity, he halted without hesitation and prepared to confront Akanu. Thus, Akanu's plan succeeded. Ace, imprisoned without a single drop of water, had been depleted, and the constant protection of Luffy had drained his energy and strength to the uttermost. Under these circumstances, Ace was no match for Akanu. Akanu unleashed a powerful punch, a fist blazing with molten lava, bearing devastating force as it hurtled towards Ace and Luffy. The force of his blow was immense, threatening to dissolve both brothers in the scorching lava. Ace was startled, but without hesitation, he instantly blocked Luffy's path, ready to sacrifice his own body for his last remaining chance. However, just as Akanu's fist was about to reach Ace, something strange happened. The fist abruptly stopped before Ace's eyes, and he could clearly feel the scorching heat radiating from the lava. Would Akanu be so kind as to spare the two? How could that be? Ace knew that given Akanu's personality and his current purpose, he would never let them go so easily. There was only one reason: someone had stopped him at the critical moment. Chapter 321 Blackbeard appears. Who is it? Akanu was shocked and furious, his eyes wide as he desperately tried to thrust his fist forward, to reach Ace. But no matter how hard he tried, it seemed as if held firmly by an invisible force, unable to move an inch. However, no one answered his question. Just then, he suddenly felt a chill beneath his feet. Looking down, he saw frost creeping slowly from beneath his feet. In a single breath, Akanu was frozen into a lifelike ice sculpture. He remained frozen in place, still thrusting his fist. This sudden scene drew everyone's attention to Aokiji. Although he and Akanu had always had different philosophies within the Navy, and there were occasional clashes, it had never reached the point of a sneak attack. Everyone knew it must have been someone else's doing. However, when it came to this technique, capable of freezing someone so quickly and powerfully, the first person that came to mind was Aokiji. After all, in this world, Aokiji was unrivaled in ice-based abilities. Besides Aokiji, it was hard to imagine anyone else capable of such powerful ice-based abilities. However, the answer soon became clear. The familiar figure of Weiss appeared, and the Marines suddenly realized what was going on. Another Yonko, the Marines were secretly surprised. They hadn't expected Weiss to intervene in the war at this time, undoubtedly adding a huge uncertainty to the already chaotic situation. "What are you still standing there for?" Weiss warned Ace and Luffy, who were still stunned. "Thank you," Ace finally realized, and he quickly pulled Luffy up, not daring to stop for a moment, running towards safety. Swish! At that moment, the frost enveloping Akanu began to slowly melt, and in a moment, Akanu recovered from his ice sculpture. Without hesitation, a fierce glint flashed in Akanu's eyes, and he roared, "Helldog!" He hurled a punch at Weiss. The fist, blazing with molten lava, carried a powerful impact that threatened to shatter everything in sight. Weiss teleported away, dodging Akanu's devastating blow. Meanwhile, Marco and Vista attacked Akanu simultaneously. Marco swung his wings, ablaze with blue flames, while Vista wielded his razor-sharp twin blades. The two coordinated perfectly, attacking Akanu from different directions, attempting to contain him. Meanwhile, Weiss reached the highest point of Marineford. He stood there, quietly observing the intense battle. Despite his immense strength, Whitebird was alone, facing the onslaught of numerous marine experts. As the battle dragged on, his wounds multiplied, and blood flowed from his wounds, spilling onto the ground. Yet, he refused to retreat, stubbornly brandishing his weapons, continuing to fight the Marines, buying more time for the pirates' evacuation. Marine headquarters was now in ruins, practically reduced to rubble. The once magnificent buildings lay scattered in shattered rubble, the ground cracked and shattered, as if struck by a catastrophic catastrophe. Whitebird stood alone, a fearless god of war, holding back wave after wave of the onrushing Marines. His massive frame was an impenetrable barrier, no Marine standing a single step beyond the fortified zone he guarded. However, the price of such intense defense was dreadful. Whitebird's strength was rapidly depleting. His body, already covered in countless wounds, now piled atop new ones. The gruesome wounds continued to ooze blood, staining his body a brilliant crimson. But Whitebird had no desire to return alive. He had completely abandoned defense, concentrating all his remaining strength in a single, all-out attack. He swung his weapon with overwhelming force, each swing hurling down upon the Marines. His reckless assault caused heavy casualties among the Navy, a scene of devastation that was almost unbearable to watch. Even the formidable Sengoku of the Navy, combined with the two admirals, was unable to halt the enraged Whitebird. Like a wild beast, Whitebird recklessly charged at his enemies, his powerful impact striking fear into the hearts of the Marines. Bang! In the throes of this fierce battle, a fist, like a cannonball, suddenly struck Whitebird's chest with incredible force. The blow was so powerful that it instantly dented his chest, leaving a noticeable dent. Wow! A mouthful of blood gushed out of Whitebird's mouth, splattering like a fountain and splashing onto the ground in front of him, creating a glaring red. This devastating blow had severely injured Whitebird. And the one who delivered the fatal blow was none other than Garp. His punch struck Whitebird's vitals directly, the powerful impact instantly breaking his ribs. The broken ribs pierced his internal organs, causing severe internal injuries. Garp, blood streamed from the corner of Whitebird's mouth. He glared at Garp, his eyes red with disbelief and anger. This was practically a surprise attack. After all, in this chaotic battlefield, no one expected Garp to use such a heavy blow against Whitebird at this moment. "I'm a Marine too," Garp said expressionlessly, offering no further explanation. He swung his fist again, continuing his assault on Whitebird. Whitebird had no time for idle chatter. He was under heavy attack from numerous Marine experts, and every second drained his remaining strength. Under the relentless assault, Whitebird's strength was gradually drained. His body began to falter, as if he would collapse at any moment. And it was at this moment that the real drama began. "Dad, long time no see." Blackbeard Teach appeared on the battlefield with the vicious criminals released from the 6th floor of the deep-sea prison. Their appearance undoubtedly added new variables and crises to the already chaotic battle situation. Chapter 322 Test. Sengoku looked solemnly at the criminals who should have been locked up on the 6th floor of Impale Down, yet now they were so brazenly there. He thought to himself, Magellan must be in grave danger there. Furthermore, with Ace the Fire Fist's escape, this was a huge loss of face for the Navy and the world government. If word got out, the prestige would be severely impacted. At all costs, these vicious criminals must not be allowed to reappear on the seas, to continue their evil deeds and disrupt world order. Sengoku thought to himself, about to intervene, but Weiss was much faster than him. "Gravity 10x, Weiss shouted softly, instantly unleashing her power. A powerful gravitational force enveloped the Blackbeard pirates, pinning them to the ground, unable to move. San Juan Wolf's massive frame was especially crushed against the ice, rendering him powerless to even struggle. Weiss, however, stood impassively on San Juan Wolf's shoulders, looking down at the men below with a look of scrutiny in his eyes. "Who is it?" The prisoners, recently released from prison, clearly unfamiliar with Weiss, the newly ascended 4 emperors, shouted in confusion and alarm. "It's you." Blackbeard Teach recognized Weiss instantly, a flicker of surprise and fear in his eyes. After all, Weiss's reputation was now quite resounding across the sea. Ho ha ho ha, the new 4 emperors are going to attack me too, Blackbeard shouted with forced composure, trying to mask his inner unease with laughter. 4 emperors, the other crew members gasped at the name, their faces lit up with nervousness. Be careful. This guy single-handedly defeated the Big Mom pirates, Lafitte warned. He knew Weiss's strength and knew the man before him was no pushover. Big Mom was defeated, everyone gasped in surprise, their fear of Weiss growing even stronger, secretly thinking, what a formidable figure, this guy seems hostile to us, Poison Q muttered. They could all clearly feel Weiss's hostile gaze, they were already being treated like prey. In truth, Weiss had his eye on these people. He saw them as excellent experimental material, especially Blackbeard. Blackbeard's unique physique, his need for sleep, his unusual body, and his ability to consume 2 devil fruits, perhaps even more, filled Weiss with curiosity, eager to study him thoroughly. Having already decided to strike, Weiss naturally held back. He extended his finger and slowly wrote a word in the air, a flame-like pattern. With a flick of his finger, the surrounding fire elements rapidly gathered, and soon a dazzling sphere appeared before everyone's eyes. The sphere radiated a blazing heat, rapidly melting the surrounding ice, and the temperature rose rapidly. Hot! Hot! Blackbeard, overwhelmed by the scorching heat, rolled dramatically on the ground, looking quite distressed. Although his dark fruit belonged to the nature type, it had unique properties. Unlike other nature types, it could not be immune to external damage through elemental transformation, but instead absorbed damage. Therefore, facing the scorching heat, Blackbeard was truly overwhelmed. Captain, if you don't act now, we're going to be roasted, Barges shouted at the top of his voice, his face filled with anxiety. Dark Point AO, Blackbeard gritted his teeth and unleashed his ultimate move. Black light began to spread from his hand, gradually engulfing the golden sphere, attempting to eliminate the fiery threat. Well done, Captain. Seeing Blackbeard successfully avert the crisis, the crew burst into praise. However, Blackbeard ignored the praise. He knew full well that the seemingly simple maneuver had actually taken a toll on him. He couldn't let this show, lest his men sense his weakness and lose their trust. So, he feigned confidence, laughing loudly, thief, that's all. He tried to convince his men that he could handle Weiss with ease. Blackbeard's subtle tactics were no match for Weiss, who thought to himself, bluster, this guy was clearly just putting on a show, trying to maintain his so-called authority in front of his men. Just as everyone was still basking in the spectacle of Blackbeard averting the crisis, something strange happened. San Juan Wolf, beneath Weiss's feet, began to shrink uncontrollably. In a matter of seconds, the once enormous San Juan Wolf shrank to the size of a doll. Weiss reached out calmly and easily grasped it. What kind of power is this? This bizarre scene instantly raised the Blackbeard pirates' vigilance to peak. Everyone stared at Weiss with wide eyes, wondering what kind of devil fruit Weiss had consumed. HMPH, Shiryu snorted coldly, tightly gripping his famous sword, Thunderstorm. He believed that no matter how formidable the enemy, as long as he had the sword in his hand, with his superb swordsmanship, he could cut them in two. This was the unwavering confidence of the master swordsman. Then, Shiryu's body vanished instantly, so swiftly that he seemed to have transformed into a flash of light. When he reappeared, he had silently arrived behind Weiss. Without a moment's hesitation, Shiryu unleashed a powerful eye slash. His eyes flashed with bloodlust, as if he could already see Weiss's face as he was cut in half by his fierce blow, and then struggled in agony. The extremely sharp sword Thunderstorm cut Weiss in half without any hindrance, but there was no expected blood-splattering scene. Before Zaleo could react, he felt his vision go black, and the last thing he saw was the faint smile on Weiss's face. Then, he completely lost consciousness, and fell limply to the ground, and the Thunderstorm sword fell to the side. Chapter 323 Escape. To the others, Shiryu, having just drawn his sword, froze in place as if under a spell. They watched helplessly as Weiss stalked towards him, transformed into a tiny doll. It all happened so suddenly. In a single encounter, the Blackbeard pirates had lost two of their most powerful admirals, casting a heavy shadow over everyone's hearts. This is terrible, everyone knew Shiryu's true strength. In a one-on-one fight, no one could claim complete victory. But now, Shiryu was so easily defeated by Weiss, how could this not be terrifying? Begging for mercy at this point? Everyone knew it would only earn the other side further disdain and serve no purpose. Altogether, Blackbeard gritted his teeth and shouted, charging forward. Though cunning, treacherous, and greedy, his strength should not be underestimated. After all, he was the ruthless figure who once scarred the 4 emperors, Shanks, with his taijutsu alone. Whether in haki or taijutsu, he possessed no weaknesses, making him a formidable opponent. However, Weiss's first target wasn't him. Defeating Blackbeard quickly proved daunting, so he had other plans in mind. His first target was someone else. Katrin Demi remained huddled in the background, her shrewd eyes darting, searching for a chance to escape. She knew Blackbeard stood no chance against Weiss, and she wasn't willing to risk her life for him. She simply wanted to save her own skin. But just as she was about to slip away, Weiss suddenly and unexpectedly appeared before her, completely catching her off guard. However, this sudden situation unleashed a ferocity in her. Before being imprisoned and impaled down, she had been a powerful pirate, wreaking havoc on the region. How could she simply sit there and wait for death? Catherine, without hesitation, transformed into her beast form. A gigantic white 9-tailed fox appeared before everyone, its 9 tails flailing wildly in the air, stirring up gusts of wind. Idiot, Blackbeard cursed, are you just sitting there in prison? Transforming now makes you a perfect target, but there was no time to think about that now, he could only turn around. Word magic cage, a massive cage descended from the sky, crashing directly onto the ice, trapping Catherine firmly within. Trapped, Catherine began to struggle frantically, her 9 tails whipping the cage relentlessly. Each lash carried immense force, making it seem precarious, as if she were about to break free at any moment. Elemental magic thunder, Weiss cast another spell. Crack, a blinding flash of lightning streaked across the sky, striking directly at Katrin. The powerful force of the lightning instantly ripped Katrin's flesh apart, and the air even smelt of barbecue. The defense and recovery abilities of a user of the mythical beast fruit were truly exceptional. Even after such a lightning strike, Katrin forged ahead, attempting to resist. Just a little lightning, Katrin gritted her teeth, about to offer a few more taunts. But Weiss didn't give her the chance. Countless lightning bolts struck one after another, the dense lightning raining down on Katrin like raindrops. Under this barrage of lightning, Katrin finally succumbed, unable to maintain her beast form, and reverted to human form. She turned pitch black, her entire body covered in burns from the lightning. With only her last breath left, she lay weak on the ground. Is this fate? Poison Q sighed softly, seeming to resign himself to the tragic scene before him. In reality, he had been secretly making his move even before Weiss appeared. He was a user of the parahuman sickness fruit, and had hoped to use his powers to infect Weiss with various diseases in order to defeat her. However, to his despair, no matter what diseases he used against Weiss, they seemed to have no effect at all. You know too little about diseases. The limited medical care on this backward planet restricts the development of your abilities, Weiss said calmly, seeing through Poison Q's thoughts. Hearing Weiss's words, Strong spread his wings and attempted to take off, attempting to escape this dangerous place. However, the next second, Poison Q and Strong were instantly transformed into 2 tiny puppets, easily captured by Weiss. Run, Blackbeard decisively shouted the order. He knew Weiss's abilities were too strange, including teleportation and her immense mobility. If the stalemate continued, the Blackbeard pirates would be defeated one by Weiss, and everyone would be killed. The plan has completely failed. The most important thing now is to save my own life, Blackbeard thought to himself, not caring about his companions anymore. He decisively abandoned them and fled in one direction. Seeing Blackbeard's escape, the other pirates scattered in all directions, each searching for a possible escape route. Chaos descended upon the scene, each desperate to escape the precarious situation. However, their enemies weren't limited to Weiss. Stop them. We can't let these vicious criminals return to the sea, Sengoku immediately gave the order. With his command, the Marines sprang into action, surrounding the fleeing criminals and attempting to stop them all, ensuring they wouldn't escape and return to the sea to commit further crimes. Meanwhile, Blackbeard was unlucky and was intercepted by Kizaru during his escape. Whitebeard, now in a frenzy, single-handedly overpowered Garp and Sengoku, 2 of the Navy's top experts, leaving the situation extremely tense. Yellow Monkey didn't want to be hit by a punch from the enraged Whitebeard. That was no joke, and he would probably be half dead if hit by one punch. So he thought, Just delay Blackbeard's escape speed a little, just to paddle along. After all, the Admiral's monthly salary is only a few dollars, why bother risking his life? So, Yellow Monkey put on a leisurely look, blocking Blackbeard, seemingly trying to stop him seriously, but in fact he didn't use his full strength, just dealing with Blackbeard. Chapter 324, Team Annihilation. Kizaru launched a fierce attack at Blackbeard, but Blackbeard easily absorbed it using the power of the dark fruit. Wow, Blackbeard, Kizaru teased, but he wasn't letting his guard down. Knowing Blackbeard's strength, he didn't engage him in close combat. Instead, he fully utilized the power of his Pika 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 no Mi, constantly keeping his distance and attacking Blackbeard like a kite. After all, his mission was simply to contain Blackbeard, there was no need to engage him head-on. Meanwhile, the rest of the Blackbeard pirates were being held back by the Marines. Members like Avalo Pizarro and Baskchat had only recently escaped from impaled down and hadn't fully recovered, their strength still far from peak. Surrounded by the Vice Admirals of Marine Headquarters, they were gradually losing ground. Damn it, Avalo Pizarro was furious and anxious. Just as he was about to unleash his island fruit power to turn the tide of the battle, he was caught off guard by a surprise attack from Spider-Man. Seastone cuffs were a deadly sight. Once they were on, he couldn't activate his fruit power. Spider-Man had been eyeing this dangerous individual ever since Pizarro appeared on the battlefield. Spider-Man knew that if Pizarro used his fruit power, even Marineford might become his weapon. The Navy's reputation would be completely shattered, and the consequences would be disastrous. Scum like you should stay and impale down, Spider-Man grumbled, manipulating 8 blades and charging at Pizarro. Instantly, Pizarro's body was covered in countless wounds, and blood flowed profusely. Chop off your legs, Spider-Man's face was filled with murderous intent, as if he were ready to devour Pizarro alive. At this moment, Spider-Ghost suddenly heard footsteps coming from behind him. He subconsciously turned around to look, and when he saw it, cold sweat instantly flowed down his forehead. When Weiss appeared, Spider-Ghost felt nervous, but Weiss ignored him and walked straight past him towards Pizarro. Seeing this, Pizarro was so scared that he turned around and wanted to escape, but it was too late. Weiss raised his hand lightly, and Pizarro was instantly turned into a small doll, losing the ability to resist. Spider-Ghost didn't breathe a sigh of relief until Weiss left. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and secretly rejoiced in his heart. This guy doesn't seem to have any ill will towards the Navy. Spider-Ghost suddenly had such an idea, and then he was amused by his own idea. It was simply a big joke that pirates had no ill will towards the Navy. How could a pirate stand on the side of the Navy? As for why he hadn't attacked Weiss earlier, Onagumo knew full well that the gap in power between him and the 4 emperors was enormous. A rash attack would only result in easy defeat, so he hadn't dared to act rashly. In just a few minutes, with the exception of Blackbeard, who was still struggling to hold on, the rest of the Blackbeard pirates had been reduced to puppets by Weiss, a move that infuriated Blackbeard to the point of fury. Ho ha, my dream won't end just like that, Blackbeard laughed heartily, his laughter laced with resentment and determination. He hadn't given up yet, he was determined to fight his way through. Release, Blackbeard roared, harnessing the power of the dark fruit to release the remnants of the vast quantities of objects he had absorbed through the dark fruit's release of darkness. Suddenly, the surroundings became a chaotic mess, with debris flying everywhere. Seeing this, Kizaru quickly used the Pika Pika fruit to dodge the debris, while Blackbeard seized the opportunity and turned to flee. No way! At that moment, 4 sturdy iron gates suddenly rose from the ground, surrounding Blackbeard and blocking his path. Blackbeard concentrated his domineering aura in his right fist, then slammed it down on the gates. Bang! The gates shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. But just as he shattered the gates, Weiss appeared before him, blocking his path. Elemental magic snowstorm, Weiss muttered softly, and instantly, a piercing wind blew, sweeping towards Blackbeard, a chill so strong it could penetrate bone. You want my life? I'll kill you, Blackbeard roared in shock and fury. Then, his hands turned pitch black, and he unleashed another skill from the dark fruit, Dark Water. As long as he could successfully touch him, no matter what abilities he possessed, they would be unusable. During the previous battle, he had noticed that Weiss's physical skills seemed lacking, and in a close combat, Weiss would undoubtedly be no match for him. If he could control Weiss and use her for his own ends, not only would he become Pirate King, he might even become king of the world. The more Blackbeard thought about it, the more excited he became. convinced that this opportunity was too good to pass up. So, recklessly, Blackbeard charged at Weiss, his fist aimed squarely at her. The blow landed firmly on Weiss, but the anticipatory smile on Blackbeard's face froze instantly as he realized things weren't going as he'd hoped. Weiss's body, struck by Blackbeard's blow, instantly transformed into a puff of black smoke. The smoke took on a strange, almost lifelike form, twisting and swirling in the air. Then, it barreled straight into Blackbeard's mouth and nose, completely burrowing into his body in the blink of an eye. "What the hell is this?" Blackbeard shouted, eyes wide with fear and shock. He could sense something strange entering his body, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was, and a surge of unease welled up within him. "It's just a little virus," Weiss said flatly. "You think you can defeat me with that? Stop looking down on me." Blackbeard's face flushed red with anger. He bent his legs, pretending to fight Weiss to the death. He looked quite intimidating, as if he was about to rush forward and fight Weiss regardless of the consequences. However, to everyone's surprise, Blackbeard didn't actually rush towards Weiss. Instead, he turned and fled. His massive body was like a black tank, crashing through everything in his way. However, his speed slowed down, and his body began to show signs of abnormality, gradually turning red, until he looked like a cooked prawn, red all over, and his steps became unsteady. Chapter 325, Beating. It looked as if the virus had indeed taken hold in Blackbeard's system, profoundly affecting him. Though Blackbeard still managed to run with difficulty, each step seemed labored, as if his body had lost control and was becoming increasingly unresponsive. As he ran, he desperately tried to think of a way to escape the virus's effects, but it was like a maggot in his bones, constantly eating away at his body, worsening his condition. His situation was now extremely critical. "It's just a virus," Blackbeard tried to assert himself, but before he could finish his words, his legs suddenly gave way, and he collapsed to the ground with a thud, unable to rise. "Your body is truly special. I carefully cultivated these viruses. I didn't expect you to be able to hold out for so long, and even to use your haki." Weiss frowned slightly as he looked at the collapsed Blackbeard, his voice tinged with surprise. "I had originally thought the virus would subdue Blackbeard more quickly, but I hadn't expected Blackbeard to have withstood this long, relying on his unique physique, and even managed to gather his domineering energy to shatter the Iron Gate. He truly should not be underestimated." "Bastard!" Blackbeard lay on the ground, cursing weakly, but his voice faded as he grew weaker. His consciousness began to blur, and the scene before him became hazy. He was on the verge of total blackout. Weiss slowly opened his palms, and two small lightsabers materialized from thin air. With a gentle wave of his hand, the two lightsabers shot towards Blackbeard's brain and heart, respectively, at incredible speed. "Ah!" Blackbeard screamed, and then he lost consciousness completely. He lay motionless on the ground, his life or death unknown. Weiss remained cautious. He manipulated the seastone chains, tightly binding Blackbeard's limbs and body, circle after circle, tightly binding them so that even if Blackbeard woke, he would be unable to break free. Blackbeard was too cunning, after all. It would be a shame to let him escape by mistake. Blackbeard didn't obtain the tremor fruit as in the original story, and thus couldn't become a Yonko 2 years later. His ambitions were over. Like a fleeting meteor across the night sky, it shone brightly but eventually faded. Perhaps the only thing people remember him for is his capture of Ace. After all, it was this act that sparked the war. Elsewhere, the situation on the battlefield grew increasingly precarious. Whitebird was desperately trying, each strike carrying immense force, each more ferocious than the last, like a trapped beast making its final struggle. It took Sengoku, Garp, and Aokiji, 3 of the Navy's top masters, to barely subdue Whitebird. Whitebird was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling as if his energy had reached its limit. "I didn't expect you to persevere this far." Sengoku looked at Whitebird, his eyes filled with a complex mix of admiration for his old rival and a touch of regret for the current situation. He had never imagined that Whitebird, having recovered, could still fight so tenaciously in this battle. "Gulila, you two are still the same." Whitebird's resonant voice shone with heroism and indomitable spirit. Even facing the combined might of these 3 powerful warriors, he showed no fear. "This is different," he thought to himself. The situation in the Navy and the pirates was worlds apart. After each battle, he and Garp received meticulous treatment from professional Navy doctors, with access to a wide range of medical resources and ample time to recuperate. But pirates were different. On the vast ocean, fierce battles continued one after another, with almost no respite. Not only did they constantly have to contend with the Navy's pursuit, but they also faced challenges from other pirates. Fighting for territory, treasure, and other interests often led to fierce clashes. Through each battle, old injuries accumulated little by little, much like Whitebeard's injuries. "What kind of deal did you make with him?" Sengoku suddenly demanded, frowning. He felt that Whitebeard, already seriously injured and in poor health, was now so vigorous on the battlefield, and that Weiss had saved Ace. There must have been some kind of deal between the two, otherwise, how could such a coincidence have happened? "This has nothing to do with the Navy," Whitebeard snorted, not directly answering Sengoku's question. He didn't want to tell the Navy about his relationship with Weiss. With that, Whitebeard tightened his grip on his naginata and attacked again, prepared to die. Just as the battle raged and the two sides reached a stalemate, a golden laser shot out from the side like lightning. Kizaru seized the opportunity and launched a surprise attack. The laser beam was incredibly fast and powerful, and the consequences of being hit would be disastrous. Fortunately, Whitebeard, with his vast combat experience, reacted quickly, jerking his body to the side and narrowly avoiding the sudden attack. Aokiji, however, didn't miss this opportunity. He seized the moment Whitebeard's body faltered after dodging the laser and whispered, "Ice capsule." He extended his hand and pressed it against Whitebeard's abdomen. Instantly, an extremely cold force surged from his palm, and Whitebeard was instantly frozen in a thick layer of ice, as if trapped in an icy coffin. However, Whitebeard was formidable, and in the next second, with a crack, he forcibly broke free from the ice. "I can't freeze vibration," Aokiji sighed, a look of helplessness on his face. He knew full well that Whitebeard's tremor fruit was too powerful. Even though his own freezing ability could restrain many opponents, it would be difficult to completely restrain Whitebeard. Although Whitebeard appeared unharmed, the freezing attack had in fact significantly impacted him, leaving him slightly frostbitten, causing his movements to slow down for a moment. Kizaru keenly noticed this subtle change. Yosakuni no Magatama, countless dazzling spheres of light rained down upon Whitebeard, a dense barrage that completely engulfed him. Undeterred, Whitebeard punched the air in front of him, unleashing the powerful tremor fruit. The air vibrated violently as if by an invisible force, creating a powerful shockwave that sent the incoming spheres flying, neutralizing the ferocious attack. However, the danger was not over. Helldog, Akainu appeared silently at some point. Without a moment's hesitation, he swung his fist, oozing with molten lava, and slammed it down on Whitebeard's head, intending to crush it with the sheer force of his blow. Dang! With a resounding clang, Whitebeard quickly raised his naginata, firmly blocking Akainu's powerful blow. The two collided, sparks flying, and the powerful impact spread outward, cracking the surrounding ground. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.